Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Duet Reviews, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre. I am your host for this episode, co-artistic producer of all things here at the Cup, Ryan Borochovitz, and I'm joined by my other co-artistic producer, Mackenzie Horner. Mac, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Ryan. Thank you. As you can tell, we are in the midst of a Canadian winter, as both Ryan and I are rocking sweaters tonight because there is a blizzard going on outside our doors.
Indeed. So today, speaking of Canadian things, we are talking about this Canadian premiere of the play Things I Know to Be True, which was just playing at the CAA Theatre, produced by Mirvish. The playwright's name is Andrew Bovell and is directed by Philip Riccio. And the run has completed. We are kind of treating this as a bit of an afterthought reflection, more so than go out and see this show. But we both had a good time watching it and thought, we
separately, we went and saw it on two different occasions.
We did. Well,
we were not together.
First. You saw it
I
first.
did see it first.
And
I sent a glowing video call into you and Jill going, I don't do this often, but if there's a show you need to see in the city right now, it's this one. Yeah, and I was planning on wanting to see this play anyway, so it made for a good excuse to, with that glowing recommendation, of course. It has an amazing cast. Seana, McKenna, and McCamus are both prominently featured. For those watching this on YouTube, you can see them in the poster behind you. And for younger actors, who we'll all talk about in due turn as well. And it was, a really interesting show that we will talk about at length here. But before we do, we have to ask our favorite icebreaker question. That's
Mac, what is in your cup today?
Well, because it is a snowy, cold, blistering night that I walked home in and I looked like the abominable snowman by the time I got home, I have made myself a cup of hot chocolate.
Nice.
So I'm having a nice marshmallowy hot chocolate at the moment. And then I also have a cup of cranberry Crystal Light next to me as well. So when I finish off my hot chocolate, I will have another drink because I have been talking on the phones all day. So my voice is feeling the wear and tear of it. So there we go.
Enough. Cool. And in my cup, the cup, I have water because I've been indoors for most of the afternoon and into the evening now. So I have less of the chill that I need to exercise with a hot beverage. And kind of just felt like some H2O.
Well, it's important to have after that delicious dinner you made yourself.
Well, yes, it was very good.
Yes.
We don't need to share that for those.
Oh, come on now,
Ryan.
Canada.
Okay.
They know us too well by now. We can share them.
It was tacos. Anyway, things I know to be true. So we're going to start with, just as we do, the kind of just very blanket statements about this show. Even though this Mirvish run has ended, it is a play that seems to be doing pretty well and will hopefully
got extended. It was an extended run.
It was an extended run, so hopefully we'll have more of an afterlife beyond its original Australian production and now this North American premiere. So if anybody is tuning into this, perhaps because they've read the play which is published, or if they are seeing another production later down the line, we don't want to necessarily spoil the show for you if you would rather go in untainted. We are just going to talk about the show itself a little bit, this particular cast and production, but then we will put up a spoiler shield of some kind, and anything after that is fair game. And for people who did see this production that has already come and gone, we hope you'll stick around with us for the entirety of that. Mac, I'll throw it to you, since usually when you're hosting, you throw it to me. Would you like to provide a brief non-spoiler summary for this piece?
Sure. Okay. Now know how Ryan feels when I throw this at him at the last minute. Okay. So basically, this play is set in Australia, and it centers around this family, mother and father, Bob and Fran, and they have 4 children who are all in their now mid, like the youngest daughter, Rosie, is in her late 20s. And then you have the oldest daughter, Pip, who is, I think, in her early 30s by this point in the story, because Rosie was a late, unexpected addition to the family, as we find out. But basically what happens is Bob and Fran, such great old people names, feel like they have now got the kids all out of the house, and they are now kind of entering into those golden age retirement years, or so they think. But then over the course of the play, basically it's broken up into each of the children come to their parents with an issue of some kind, and then it's the fallout from those issues as they kind of snowball with the effects on the family with that. And we kind of see what happens when kind of in the words of The Godfather Part 3, just when you think you're out, they pull you back in. And that's very much the case here. Is Bob and Fran both think they've saved up money. They're gonna go off and travel. They're like, Bob's already retired from his work kind of at the car plant. Fran's working as kind of a nurse, but she can take time now to kind of do other things. And then of course, in true to form life, like as my dad says, nothing goes according to plan in that. And like once you have kids, they're always going to be coming back to you, back to the home base to reconvene and kind of go out and seek advice and that type of thing there. So it's all kind of what happens over that time period of Bob and Fran dealing with their 4 kids. And then what's neat is the play is told, what you don't know at the beginning is it's told in flashback, because the play opens with the phone ringing in the kitchen late at night, and all 4 of the kids come and explain how, as a parent, one of the worst things that can ever happen to a parent is getting the call in the night. And how that kind of, no matter what happens when you pick up that phone, your life is changed in some way. Where something, like, because nobody ever calls it either early in the morning or late at night and it's good news. There's always something going on in life that you're going to be affected by. So we open with the phone, but then we flash back and deal with all 4 of the kids. And then there is a big ending where we find out what was going on in that phone call. And I won't spoil what happens on the call, but basically that is the climax.
That's coming up.
Not yet. That comes later. So we have that. But yeah, basically that's kind of the plot. I don't think I missed anything major. I don't want to spoil what each of the kids are going through, because I think that is a kind of a really good surprise that you don't expect. Because even the stuff you do expect doesn't quite go the way you think it is. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good job describing this play. Very, very good at avoiding the spoilers, because there's definitely a lot of twists and turns here.
Yes.
Do you want to just give a general appraisal before we move into spoiler zone?
Yeah, so I'll start this off by saying this was a play I had wanted to see, but I didn't know if I was ever going to get a chance, because I was at the time in the middle of going home to help my parents, and I was in the middle of searching for a roommate. So my weekends were just booked, and then weeknights are just impossible to get there in a good time because the office and everything else. So I was hesitant, but then my uncle decided to call me because he had 2 extra tickets to see the show, and I immediately was like, yes, I will happily take those 2 tickets. So it was myself, and then my dad came down to see it. He knew nothing about the play, neither did I. I just knew that Tom McCann and Shauna McKenna were starring, so I was like, it's got to be good if you get Tom McCann and Shauna McKenna.
And not at Stratford, no less, because we see them at Stratford all the time. But
it's true.
This is
exactly
a rare occasion.
You're seeing them outside the world of the festival. It's shocking. So, yeah, I went and saw it, and as I said, I knew nothing about this play. I went in as blind as a bat on this one, and just let the natural waves of the story hit me. And oh my goodness, I was tearing up at the end with the climax. My dad cried. The old ladies around me were all crying. So definitely the emotions were being felt. And all I could say when I was coming out of that was, if my other family members who didn't see it said, we want to come see it now, I would not have hesitated to say, yes, let's go again. This is definitely a play that, even though I know it's an emotional roller coaster of a play, I was just so ready to go back into that story again. It's just one of those beautiful pieces that I just went, damn. You see something really good. And this is kind of like, I described it to my dad, like, this is a very much a modern contemporary to Death of a Salesman in a lot of ways. And it's
interesting as a comparison, because there's another play in particular that it definitely made me think of. I was going to wait till post-spoiler to say this, but I feel like it's not a big spoiler, so I'll say it now since you've already brought the comparisons.
Yeah,
it's Fiddler on the Roof. And that's probably why you and I both liked it so much.
I can definitely see the Fiddler vibes.
It is very much the story of parents responding to their children, living lives that are different than what the parents might have expected them to live. And, we've expanded a bit that even though Golda plays a very noble and important role in Fiddler, it's very much about co-parenting, whereas Fiddler is very much about a father responding to his daughters.
Yes.
But this is, it is, if you just split up the role of Tevye into both parents, then this is essentially, obviously very different circumstances and contexts. You and I have talked about Fiddler many times before, ad nauseum, until the cows come home. There's no lack of places for people to hear our thoughts about that, both on and off this show.
Yeah.
But I feel like, and I wonder if this was something that was actively thought of in the writing process, but that felt like a very palpable comparison to me. What made you think of Death of the Salesman, though?
Well, I mean, without going into spoilers, basically what made me think of it is that this is a family drama, and in particular, it's kind of the story of the parents kind of going one way, and then the kids are going another way, and the wheels are kind of coming off this cart as it's rolling along. And then you also have kind of that, even though it was set in Australia, it was very kind of suburban America. Like, you can usually see this place set in the 50s or contemporary. There was very much, or maybe 60s, because the women do have a stronger role to play in the story. They're not just at home, as you would see in kind of Death of a Salesman, but it's that kind of that contemporary family drama of there is some high action in this play that is going to really drive and affect the climax of the story. And if you know the ending of Death of a Salesman and what happens to Willie Millman there,
spoiler shield.
Yeah, exactly. So
perhaps. Well,
yes, I'm hinting at what happens at the end of this play, which is eerily similar to what happens to,
but also different.
But also different,
mm-hmm.
Or so we think. We'll have to see. Yeah. That's a whole other discussion question we could have.
Well, we got time.
Depending on what time we have, maybe I'll bring it up.
Depending on how long
this
discussion goes. Yes.
Yeah. Either way, so yes. But yeah, generally speaking, I thoroughly enjoyed the play. It's a modern classic I could see easily coming back and being reviewed, because it's a very kind of contemporary look at a modern family drama and kind of what families are going through today, particularly with what happens with the character of Maya. I think that's a very prevalent topic that's going on in families now.
Mia, I think it was pronounced.
Is it Mia?
Yeah.
Mia. Okay, sorry, Mia.
Yep.
What's going on with Mia today? Also, each of the children all bring up different storylines that are very common or prevalent and contemporary, where I think sometimes Death of a Salesman can feel kind of a bit stale in kind of some of the family drama that goes on there. This feels very much more like a family drama that can definitely speak to more audiences today, that I think would be very interesting. And then I even said to my dad, like, I could easily see somebody taking this script and making it into an Oscar-winning film.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I don't remember if I read this in a review somewhere or perhaps in the program, but Nicole Kidman has purchased the rights to it.
That makes sense. She is Australian.
She is Australian. I don't know if it's because she wants to play Fran, to be determined, I suppose.
Fran and Hugh Jackman as Bob.
That would be interesting, but I believe it's planned to be a 6-part miniseries for TV as opposed to a single movie.
Okay.
Which 6 parts feels interesting.
You'd have to add a lot of filler in.
Well, and that's the thing, like, it's, this isn't a spoiler, but the plot is very much structured around each of the 4 children in a somewhat episodic way that they kind of each get their due. So if you had told me a 4-part miniseries, I'd be like, that makes perfect sense. But I'd be very curious to see how the structure and pacing would work in 6 parts.
Yes. But okay, now I'm picturing Nicole Kidman as Fran. I'm like, okay, I could see her doing this. I mean, I think she'd be very different from Seana McKenna.
Very much so. They're very different performers.
They're very different. Also, women at different times in their lives. I think Nicole Kidman is, a few years younger than Seana McKenna is.
I would say so.
So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm trying. It's kind of finding a little bit hard to picture her at this point in her life as Fran, because she does see, like, how old is she? Nicole Kidman is. I gotta look this up now.
Gotta look this up.
Yeah, because I'm trying to picture her as Fran, and I'm like, because she can't play Pip anymore. Even though I could definitely see her playing Pip.
I could see her in the 90s playing Pip.
Okay, she's 55.
Yeah, okay.
So she's a bit on the young side, because how old is Seana McKenna? She's 66, so there's a decade difference between the two of them.
Right. And, like, I believe I just read that she purchased the rights and it was planned to be a 6-part miniseries. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's happening right away or that it's an active initiative.
For a long time.
Yeah. So she's just securing it, that there's an exciting Australian play with a strong female role. I'm snapping that up.
Absolutely. I mean, I could usually see Meryl Streep being a Fran.
Oh, yes, I definitely could.
Yeah.
I feel like Seana McKenna and Meryl Streep have very similar hits and could do a lot of the same roles as each other.
Actually, who also would be really good as Fran would be Imelda Staunton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I could see a very different interpretation of Fran in that. But
either way,
like
she's certainly a little older than the character already at this point. That I would say so. So it might be. Well, it would be a different interpretation. Meryl Streep's in her 70s. I feel old.
Yes. Either way, so yeah,
Okay.
this is a whole wonderful side tangent of Ryan. Maybe we'll do a special editorial one if we were fan casting a cinematic version of Things I Know to Be True. Who would we cast and why? Like, who'd be like
Nicole
our top
Kidman
3?
can watch and take notes and be like, "Oh yeah."
Hire us, Nicole Kidman. Ryan will happily a dramaturg and adapt this play for you.
Sounds fun.
Either
Cool.
way. So yeah, Ryan, what do you think of this play, though?
Yeah.
I'm kind of giving my thoughts.
I liked it a lot for a lot of the same reasons that you did. I thought, it's funny. So Mirvish put out this little trailer on their website and social media for it. And I was already wanting to see this play. But when I saw this trailer, I was starting to have second thoughts or maybe doubts about, like, I don't know if this is going to be...
You had doubts, Ryan?
I had doubts, like in the play doubt. Because the trailer itself was interesting, that it basically just extracted all of the quippiest lines and stitched them together into just like a sequence. And on one hand, now having watched the show, I feel like that was a smart move, that it didn't spoil any of the major plot points or especially the emotional highs and lows. And that's a big part of the sell of this show. But at the same time, watching that trailer, I felt like this, again, now having seen the whole thing, like they're really selling something different than what the show is. Because this, I was watching that trailer, I'm like, this just looks like a bad Chuck Lorre sitcom. It doesn't seem like an actual, like the serious emotional drama that it actually turns out to be. So I was hesitant going in a little bit, but I knew I wanted to see it. Obviously, I love these two leads.
Yes.
Christine Horn, who plays Pip in this, I had just worked with her earlier this year on Three Sisters. She played a gender-swapped version of the character Alex Verschinnen. And it's so funny, this week that I saw the show, this was a real week of Three Sisters reunions for me. Because first I saw the Shakespeare Bash production of King Lear, which, Stephen Howe and Ben Ugonathan, who played Carl and Andre respectively in Three Sisters, were both in that. And then I saw this, and Christine was in that. And then the day after I saw this, I saw Prodigal, which our review just came out for last week. And that was another Howland Company production who produced Three Sisters and had many recurring cast members. And at opening night for that, I ran into pretty much everyone else from that production. And then a couple nights after that, I was back at Crow's to see the stage reading of Queen Margaret, which Christine was supposed to play Queen Margaret in, I believe. But she couldn't do that because of the extending of this run of Things I Know to Be True.
Yep.
But then she was still there. I guess she just had to cancel because she could no longer do the rehearsals for it. Right. So, but was still there that evening. So this was a whole week of everybody from Three Sisters. Was just in stuff, and I saw all of them in a single week. So that was fun. Sorry, side tangent there. But I was excited to see this show. And while I had trepidations after seeing that trailer, it really did deliver, and it's the emotional highs and lows that they refrained probably smartly from putting in that trailer are really what sell it. The cast is amazing. There's this very quippy energy to the dialogue that is...
They have very good synergy.
Yeah, but better than what they were presenting in the trailer, in my opinion, where it just looked like, here's a bunch of funny, sly, sarcastic jokes. Whereas... we haven't even put up the spoiler shield yet, so I'll refrain.
Not up yet, Ryan.
I will refrain from pointing out some of my favorite one-liners from this show. But it really just does a great job of kind of capturing the rhythm of a family, the way people come in and out, the million conversations happening at once. And the actors do such an amazing job of selling this very well-written text. I do have some light critiques, we could call them, which I don't need to kind of get into pre-spoiler shield. But there's like a lot else really good on. The quality of the production was really well done. It's Mirvish, so kind of they have budget to make that happen. And
they actually built the house.
Yeah, they built the house. The set was really amazing. Where we
in the backyard.
We saw the cross section of the kitchen and the backyard at all times. It was really well done, and more than anything, it's the writing and the acting that really make this piece worthwhile to see. I'm sorry that we're only getting this out for people who might not ever get to see this cast perform it, but the writing is very strong as well. So hopefully subsequent productions will get equally talented actors who can really sell it.
I could even see Stratford reviving this with Seana McKenna and Tom McManus being like, "Hey, you did it in Toronto.
Yeah, that would be
How about you
interesting.
come do it for a summer at the festival?"
Yeah, I'm sure that would sell pretty well, and people
Program that with a King Lear, you're good to go.
As in this coming season, the Paul Gross King Lear, or
Well, maybe that one or another one. Who knows?
or it'll be a while.
Or even
before they do
some
King
other
Lear again.
Shakespeare family drama. Titus
Yes.
Andronicus.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yes, well, it's too late for this season of Stratford, but maybe in a future year, I could totally see that. It would feel very much at home there.
Yes, it would. The studio theater there, I could see it fitting very well in that area.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Either way,
we've danced around it enough. Like I said, the production's over, so we don't need to list all of the catch it from this date to this date.
That's right.
But yeah, we will now put up a spoiler. What did we just say the spoiler was going to be?
It's a spoiler phone.
Oh, right. Dring, dring,
yes.
dring.
Yes.
Drama.
Yes. Exactly. Once you hear that, once you pick up the phone and listen, you'll never be the same again.
There's no going back to your life before that. No, that's a very good point. It just makes me think of when we reviewed the Huns at Assembly Theater, the spoiler phone we had there. Neil here, spoilers. Whereas this is a very
That's still such a great gag.
Yeah, love that.
Neil's still here.
Neil's still here. But we're not talking about the Huns. These are now spoilers from here on out for things that know to be true. Where would you like to start? Do you want to kind of get more granular into specific characters? Do you want to talk about production elements? We have a whole list of thematic questions. Why don't we do our
classic questions where we'll kind of talk about our favorite castmate or our favorite performance of the show, and then we'll get into some production, and then we'll kind of segue into our 6 discussion questions that we have formulated based off this play.
Sure.
Because it just gave us that much goodies to talk about. So Ryan, who was your Cash. I mean, I think obviously we should talk about Seana and Tom first, and then we'll talk about the children afterwards, because I think they deserve their own.
Sure, yes. It would be, all of the children were great and very well performed, but if we're each just picking one cast shout out, I feel like, sadly, they pale in comparison, unfortunately, but these 2 top billed stars really, the show is so much centered around their relationship, their dynamic with each other, and to even try to pick a favorite between the 2 of them would be a fool's errand, in my opinion, because they're both so strong in this.
Agreed.
The thing I was going to say before about my favorite line in the show, and I think this is just a testament to, the synergy between these 2 actors, was just the one moment. It happened kind of near the middle after the intermission, but a little while in. They just share this very passionate kiss that kind of came out of nowhere and was surprising.
It's their anniversary night. They're celebrating.
But it was kind of like they were dancing, but then it just kind of was this very tender moment that neither one of them seemed to be expecting.
Yeah.
And then Franz says, "Do you have cancer?" And that was the most I laughed in this entire show.
That was such a human moment because, I mean, to get into background some of my family, my dad has a history of cancer, diabetes, that type of thing in the family. So obviously now that he's in his 60s, he's been going through for blood tests and throat tests and things like that because he's got all new doctors who all kind of want to poke and prod him. And of course, one of the questions that always comes up is, do you have cancer?
Yeah.
Thankfully, knock on wood, all has been okay. The doctors have all given him clear health. But, it's one of those things that my mom constantly saying, do you have cancer, Kevin?
Well, I just thought the line was so funny because it spoke to so much history between these people that they are at a point in their relationship where a kiss like that is rare, so rare that it's not like, oh, wow, what a sweet thing you did. Thank you. It's are you dying is the reaction she has to it. And it's just such it was the hardest I laughed in this show, but it also, the second, you come down off that laughter, you think about it, it's sad and touching and very poignant, I feel like is a word that is very easy to use to describe so much of what goes on in this show. It's the classic, critic word, buzzword we could put on it. But poignancy is the name of the game, and these actors have poignancy down.
They do.
I don't know.
I think what made them so great in the leads, well, first of all, these are the marathon characters, because basically kind of just like a Fiddler on the Roof, once the child's storyline is done or their big scene with the parents is over, they kind of disappear.
Yeah, they come back and forth. But
Rose is the one that kind of comes back the most because she's living with her parents again. But it's one of those things that kind of, once their scenes are done, like Pip, her storyline basically finishes before the end of Act 1, and then she's basically off stage for a majority of Act 2 until like the last scene.
Yeah, she
doesn't show up. She gets mentioned in Act 2, but she's like still somewhere off in Vancouver.
Yes.
So it's one of those things there. But I mean, so basically, you knew when you're casting this, you need to have two performers who can really do the marathon run with this piece and hold the show for 2+ hours. It's a long show. Like it's like over 2 hours. Like it's a heavy show emotionally to be running the gambit through. And when you cast Seana McKenna and Tom McCamus, what you get is something that most actors don't naturally have unless there's someone who's worked really closely together. But it's a natural relationship rapport between each other, because Seana and Tom have played scene partners, they played lovers, they played it all together, because I mean they're old vets of Straw and Stratford, and so they've done all the roles together you probably could do, or they've played opposite each other in different plays and things like that. And so, and they just know each other from having been in the same vicinity together for so long, that when you pair them up together, they already have a natural shorthand with each other that doesn't feel forced or hokey, where it's like, oh yeah, you're putting the old married couple and oh yeah, let her do this and that for you. There's just a natural way that they knew when to pause with each other, when to give a small look to one another, that you just can't get if you were just to grab two random actors and go, here.
You're a couple now.
You're
been together since you were children. Go.
Yes. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about Seana McKenna and Tom McCamus is that because they have such a well-built history in the Canadian theater together, they naturally can fall into that with each other and go and actually have lived experiences, because they've gone through all the Stratford and Shaw festival seasons and the ups and downs of different shows they've done together, that they have such a well-built history that you can go, aha, okay, we know each other well enough that we can easily play a married couple. It makes it believable. And that's something that if you don't have that, this whole play doesn't work. Because, I guess another spoiler is that we can say, the big twist ending is that you think throughout the whole play that it's going to be Bob who's going to die, or one of the kids, because they just set up that the children are narrating at the top.
Yeah, Bob is shown to be about to answer the phone, so we know the phone call at least isn't referring to him. Doesn't mean that there wouldn't be scenes after answering the phone.
Correct. He answers the phone, has bad news, has a heart attack or something, you know. But the surprise twist is that it's Fran who does not make it out of this play by the end. And so with that, you're kind of going, okay. And to have such a reaction that Tom McCamus gives to losing his wife. Once again, you got to go somewhere really deep and a place you don't want to have to go to constantly. Yeah. But the fact that they are friends off stage together, I think allows him to kind of, I've never met them. I haven't met the man, had a one-to-one with him, say, hey, where do you go to get to that emotional scene where you're ripping out the garden? But I have to imagine that because he has a natural friendship and work partnership with Seana McKenna from their years of working together, he can naturally go to a place of going, what would it be like if one day I woke up and found out that this person I've known for 30 plus years in the arts community, who I've shared the stage with, who I've played couples with, is now just gone in a blink. You know, like if you don't know someone, you got to go. If you don't know your partner, you got to go to somewhere in yourself to find that dark place. You got to go get that emotional weight. But since he knows her, can probably go to some place a little bit more accessible and go, well, like, what would it be like to lose a friend, to lose a work partner like that? You know, so either way, the point being is they have such a great partnering together that my dad said, I don't know if I could picture anybody else. Or like he goes, I don't know too many Canadian actors who you could pair up. Maybe Lucy Peacock and Tom McCamus could do it as well, because once again, they've had a long history of working together at the festivals. But maybe you could get somebody there. But it's one of those things where it's like you got to have really good casting and really good camaraderie between your two parents, that they're going to be able to lean on each other as well as give each other the natural back and forth to kind of really make this piece work. And to make you really feel that, like, when they have some of those really serious conversations, that this is a lived-in thing. Like when Fran is criticizing Bob for doting on Pip and doing the whole, she would never lie to me about having an affair. And Fran's like, bullshit, she is, I can tell. It's like, you know they've had that debate with each other of Bob dotes on Fran too much, Bob dotes on Pip too much, and Fran compensates by being overly hard on her daughter. While at the same time, you have Fran doting on Ben, and Bob going the opposite direction of he's going to be extra hard on Ben. It's one of those things of, they've had these conversations with each other a million times. So when you find out that she's been squirreling money away, there's an understandable hurt, because he goes, we have been partners in this, and now I find out you have your money.
Do you love me? Is what that moment basically was.
That is. I mean, it's a much darker version than Do You Love Me? Because that ends.
No, but functionally,
that scene ends with the question of, "Ooh, what's going to happen here?"
Yeah, but functionally, it serves the exact same role in the plot.
Yes.
It's we've gone through a few of these kids having their problems.
Yeah.
Have we checked in with each other lately? Are we okay?
Have we checked in at all?
Because
we will get into that whole dilemma because we have a whole question about it. But on the children's side, because we have 4 kids in this piece, we have Christine Horn, who plays the eldest daughter, Pip. Then we have, I think the next child is Daniel
Slaney. Apologies if we're mispronouncing anybody's names. Please, if you're watching, hey, thanks for watching. Get in the comments and correct us.
Yes, he plays Ben, who's kind of the firstborn son. Then you have Michael Borochovitz. We'll go with that. As Mia, who starts off. What was their original?
Mark.
Mark, right? Name. So Mark then transitions to Mia, and then the youngest daughter is Rosie, who was kind of the accident baby, who in some ways saved their marriage.
Yes,
which we'll get into later.
And Rosie's played by Elena Bale.
So, Ryan, who is your shout out for the children?
Like, they're all so strong, but I think if I have to give one shout out, it's gonna be Daniel Maslany as Ben. I felt like the way he physicalized this character, who is described canonically in the script as always in motion, he took that note and quite literally ran with it. But like every time he was on stage, he would not stop for a second. He's just running around. He's taking off his shirt because his mom still does his laundry. Yeah, of course, we see that in the earlier scenes where we don't really know what his deal yet or what's going on. He's just like big shot business guy, has a lot of money, bought a car, he's doing well for himself, still has his mom do his laundry. He's always coming in just to like take off his shirt and leave it like, okay, bye, can't stay. But then we find out when we get to his episode in the, each kid has some kind of problem sequence that is this show. We find out that he's been doing some dubious business stuff. He's been skimming money.
Dubious. He's been embezzling shit.
He's been embezzling
thousands of dollars.
I'm trying to be gentle about it, but yes, he has been
being gentle, Ryan. I'm like Bob on this. There's no being gentle about what he does.
He has been embezzling from his company, and he has been doing an awful lot of drugs, and that maybe recontextualizes all that motion and jitteriness. And then this. We get to the apex of this plot line in a scene where he is completely blasted out of his mind when it's all crashing down on him. And the way he just goes back and forth across the stage.
That scene had me on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, and as we said, it was like the setting is we have this cross-section of half of the kitchen, half of the backyard, and just the way he's darting back and forth between the two, and everyone else is following him because we're in the middle of a conversation. What are you doing? What do you mean you stole money? What do you mean you're on drugs? You brought drugs into our home? And something interesting. So they had talkbacks after this show. I don't know if you stuck around for yours.
I did. I had Michael and Daniel.
That's very interesting because I had Christine and Alana. So
nobody got Shauna and Tom.
I guess they don't bother.
We've done 2
sticking
hours. We're out.
Yes, but during the talkback, one of the people in the audience asked, I forget what the question was, but it was something about the directing. And I think Christine answered the question, said that the director did a very good job of giving the actors freedom to not lock them into specific placements or movements or physical choices. Just like do what feels natural in the moment. And as long as you kind of during key important moments hit your light, everything else is fair game.
Yes.
And hearing that at this talkback really made me rethink this scene where he's darting back and forth across the stage. And I don't know if this maybe it is very different every night, just depending on what impulses he's feeling. There are things that maybe are getting a little dangerous in this scene physically that they would probably want to lock in. But like
Tom McCamus and Daniel are full on giving it to each other.
Mm-hmm. But when Daniel, like, at one point, he just kind of half gently, half not tosses down a chair in the kitchen. I don't know if that happened in your performance too. I imagine
they do like a table or a chair kind of movement where it does get overturned in the process.
He kind of just like pushed the chair down. It was just like, it's in my way, I can't. And then Tom, so cool and so stoically, just picked it up and like put it down. Like, and part of me was kind of wondering, like, was that supposed to happen? And these are just such pros that they're able to make it look like this is part of the fight.
Right.
Or was that part of the blocking? And then when I found out there may have been no blocking during any of this, or very loose blocking, I was like, wow, his performance, that's just to bring it back to the actor himself, just the manic energy that he brought. You know, even if he wasn't my favorite of the children.
Anybody's favorite of the children?
He's probably, if I'm ranking them in terms of like how much I sympathize with them, he's probably my least favorite of the
I don't sympathize with him at all.
Yeah. Well, I do to a point, but we don't need to get into that here. But yes, he's the biggest like man baby sort of child. Well, he has 3 sisters, so if anyone's going to be the man baby, it's him. But but yes, he's very much, he just sold this character so well that like I still felt for him even when I disagreed with all of his choices. And the way he sold that really intense scene was just so well done. So he gets my shout out. How about you?
Mine goes out to Christine Horn as Pip. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Alana Bale as Rosie. She is such a wonderful constant presence, but the only reason why Christine Horn is getting the edge on her is because of the letter scene.
The letter scene
with really Shauna. I mean, once again, I don't know how much of this goes also to Shauna being an excellent scene partner of just reacting to this narrated letter, but just the way Christine delivers this epic, tragic letter about the fact that because her whole storyline is she works for the government in the education department. In the first scene, she's flying off to Vancouver, BC, Canada for a conference. We then get the next scene of her, which is her big scene of she's been out running in the morning. And of course, Fran finds her in the backyard and goes, there's something wrong, as her mother does. And then we find out that she is wanting to take a job and leave her family in Vancouver. And Fran, rightfully so, catches her daughter and goes, there's another person, isn't there? There is another man in this partnership that you are going after. And of course, Pip, the daughter, goes, no. And then of course, Bob comes in and goes, what's going on? And then of course, it comes down to Pip would never lie to me. If she says there's no other person and it's just for a job, so be it. And then of course, you get a letter that says, I lied. There is another man. I met him at the conference. He has a
mom for seeing right through me.
Right? Exactly. The mom foresaw. It's one of those things of just, it's very hard because there's no real blocking in this. It's literally just reciting a monologue sitting next to somebody else.
Yeah.
And they're not even really looking at each other.
Well, because they're not there in physical space together. They are the actors are for the sake of manifesting this scene, but they can't look at each other because that would break the illusion of the distance between them.
I mean, you could have Pip look at her mom and her mom looking at her in the distance as if she doesn't see her.
Yeah.
Either way, you could do it that way, but the point being is that this monologue is about 5 to 10 minutes long. Like, it's not a 3-minute easy peasy out monologue. Like, this is a multi-page letter that she's written to her mom, describing,
including Leonard Cohen lyrics,
which
would be hard to. You'd have to really know the song well to sing it while reading a letter, which the actors prevent us from needing to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, once again, as I said, there's not much blocking. Like, compared to Daniel's scene as Ben, where he is manic and we're finding out his big dramatic moment in the story, this is a very calm. Like, it's literally a blue light and Christine reciting this monologue, or performing. I shouldn't say reciting, because reciting just sounds like she's just reading it. She's performing this monologue out into space. and is sitting next to Shauna McKenna, who, if you're like, I don't know, where did you sit in the CAA? Because I was 3 rows from the front. So I was pretty damn close to
I was pretty much 3 rows from the back, not in the balcony, on the main rope and center.
Got you. So one of the things that, I don't know if you noticed, but as the letter went on, Shauna began to cry. She did the single tear. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So Shauna cries in this scene. Now, I don't know if she does it for every show, but for this Saturday matinee, she did. And it wasn't like a weep. It was like one of those things of, as you were reading, the single tear starts to go, and then the others start to flow. So by the end, she really had to do the wipe away thing. And they were real tears. So Shauna was actively in this monologue with Christine. And that's what made this moment so powerful. Is it'd be one thing, it was just a voiceover of this person, but because we could see Christine's reactions to what she's saying about the man who I'm having the affair with is married and is like my own husband, is happy, looks after the kids, blah, blah, blah. And he says he's going to leave his wife, even though she's done nothing wrong to him. And she goes, I know it's not true. And I blew up my family for a tryst that you called me on early on in this and warned me against too. And so it's just such a powerful scene that, I mean, now that you said Nicole Kidman's bought the rights, I am very interested to see how, because you could easily do a voiceover with a few cutaways to Christine or Pip in Vancouver, and then Nicole Kidman on the backyard bench back home and just reacting. But there's just something about the two of them on stage, not actually interacting, but reacting to one another without actually seeing each other. Just, oh my goodness, it just broke me in so many beautiful ways. I mean, it was Christine. And once again, she pulled a Fontaine. She was on stage for like 20 minutes and she was gone for like 2 hours.
Bye. I've done my part. I'll be back for the funeral.
Once again, like, she has the hard thing of, we open with Rosie's story of, she's young, she's traveling through Europe, she falls in love, has a week of banging this guy, he then steals her money. It's like, okay, all right. Yeah. This kind of felt like a York University devised theater monologue-y, like, didn't quite drop into the
cliches at that point. Yeah.
And that's what got me worried at the beginning. When I first started hearing this monologue narration, I was like, oh my God, am I going to get like a York University devised theater thing that I did in school where it's like, monologue about something that, is relatable, but also a little bit cliche. But then you get to the next scene, which is Pip, and you go, oh no, this play is going to cut way deeper than what we're expecting in this. This is going to get to a much deeper level, because she talks about how Pip found her mom banging her head against a tree in exasperation. And as we come to find out, this comes around the time when Fran was having doubts about her own marriage. Yeah. So, this scene keeps coming back, even though Pip is now off stage on her own story. It's one of those things where it's just, this one scene keeps coming back that we never actually see. But, it's such a great scene. And Christine did such a good job. And then she was gone for 2 hours. Yeah. And it's like, darn! But it's like the rest of the cast picked it up and carried the baton after she kind of passed it off to, I think it's Mia, who was the next scene.
Yeah. Yeah, so and then the next unit of covering one of the children and their stories is Mia's. And that's the one that takes us all the way to intermission. Right.
Yes.
So, well said about all of that.
Thank you.
Agree more.
Thank you.
It's funny, so just to pick up on something else you discussed a moment ago. Yeah, the opening monologue, I get why it's there, and this is, none of this is a critique of Alana's performance, because she made very good use of that monologue, and I feel like the main reason why that's there is to give her a big moment, because even though she's there for a lot of it, she's kind of the third background person in the scene. Like the final kind of episode with her is that she's going off to school, and that's kind of less dramatic than a lot of the other ones. So she kind of has to coast off of, I had a dramatic thing at the beginning that didn't necessarily get its whole chunk of the plot.
And that's why I'm now back at home with the family.
But like, part of me wondered, after that monologue ended and she shows up at home and we have this great scene of every member of the family.
Do we need the monologue?
Yeah, well, I kind of felt like this is sort of classic playwriting or screenwriting advice of, just as an exercise, start reading your script on page 20 or whatever and see, is it better without all the stuff I set up if you have to just infer it from context clues? And, that page will vary for depending on the script or the project. What I know Jeffrey Sweet in his book on playwriting talked about how that's something that he does in his seminars on playwriting. And he says more often than not, the students, after doing that, be like, yeah, it actually is so much better to start my play here as opposed to where I thought it needed to start, and let the backstory come out organically as opposed to being something you have to front load.
Right.
And so I really felt like this monologue, it's there to give Rosie a big moment early on, but they could have found other ways to do that. It was a bit kind of corny, a little cliche, a lot of the stuff she talked about.
And it fits her character of her age. She's 19, so what is her life experience at that point? Well, the big thing in her life would have been she's a bit rudderless, so she goes off, does Europe, ignores all her parents' advice of, go with girlfriends, find friends to go with, and she goes there and goes, well, okay, it's actually harder to find people to meet up with in Europe and travel with because they're with their own friends doing this adventure. So then she falls in with this guy and has kind of this first real love that we've all been through. And then, of course, he breaks her heart and it's sad.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that when you compare it to all the other drama that the other siblings present in the story, you kind of go, oh, yeah, that kind of reminds me of my own life of, at 19, this would have been a big deal.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's not
in my 30s, the Pip storyline of blowing up a family feels much more of a threat and feels like much more of a danger and something that would be scary to happen.
And I'm not even bringing this up to diminish that it would be a big deal for Rosie at this juncture in her life. I just feel like dramaturgically, that can all exist in her backstory without us needing to hear her monologue about it for 5 minutes.
Agreed. That whole opening scene tells you exactly what happens. All you need is Fran to say, you're back from your European trip so early?
Well, something went wrong. Happened? What's wrong? What happened? Something's happened.
Exactly.
And then we get the great moment of her and Bob, Rosie and Bob in the garden where he's like, so you gotta tell me what happened? He doesn't guess it, but she's just like, I fell in love with the wrong person, and that's all we need. We don't actually and I feel like it kind of hearing that monologue at the outset sort of deflates some of the tension that we might get with this character because we already know precisely what happened.
Yeah.
Whereas if we started when she returns home, we, much like everyone else in the family, would be wondering what happened. This is really concerning. Why are you back? Whereas we, the audience, are deprived of that tension because we've been told exactly what happens, and it's still troubling what happened to her, but we're not going to have any surprises in that front. So, that's dramaturgically, I would say, as much as I think on its own merits, it's a fine monologue. I just don't know if it's the best way to bring us into the world of the play.
Agreed. Now, Ryan, we've made allusions to the set kind of just being one stationary thing. Do you have any other production element you want to highlight besides the beautiful set?
I had two, and I'll try to be quick about them.
Okay.
One of them, the sound design, is really well done. And I'm not talking about Famous Blue Raincoat. I'll talk about Famous Blue Raincoat in a minute.
Okay.
The Leonard Cohen song that plays or is invoked a lot throughout this play. But just from the very beginning, the first scene, that phone, the echoey ring of that phone that increased in intensity.
It grates on you in the best way.
It gave me chills. And I was a little disappointed when they didn't repeat it in the same intensity when it comes back at the end. Because especially now, after having spent so much time with this family, that would have just meant even more. But they're just like, okay, we're at the end. Let's get there already. But in that opening scene, that sound design gave me chills before I had any idea what was even happening. So I have to shout out the sound design here.
Great dread building.
Yeah, the sound designer's name was, let's make sure you get your proper due.
Yes.
Deanna H. Choi. Very well done.
Very well done indeed.
I'll put a pin in Famous Blue Raincoat for a moment, but the other real quick production thing I want to talk about is something I think might have been an accident, but I absolutely loved it. So you remember the scene where Rosie and Mia exchange watches right before Mia goes to, was it Sydney that Mia goes to? Yeah, it was Sydney, and then Rosie's going to Brisbane. Sorry, my Australian geography is a little weak, so I'm trying to remember who went to which city. Okay, so just as kind of like parting gifts, because they don't know when they're going to see each other next, the two sisters exchange watches with each other. And as just like, Mia says, like, Mom and Dad gave me this as, like, I think it was a graduation present.
Yes, it was a graduation present.
And, like, this is kind of part of my old life. I don't know. Do I still wear this? And then Rosie says, well, I'll wear it. And then, okay. And then she gives Mia her watch and, like, here, now we have each other's watches. It's a cute sibling moment. But then a scene later, when Mia's doing her next monologue, the watch is reflecting off of the light and creating like the reflection on the wall. And maybe that's an accident. I don't know. But it drew my eyes to this interesting symbol device that we've just been introduced to in a way that I don't think I would have if that lighting quirk didn't happen.
Interesting.
Yeah, then like the watches, oddly enough, were never mentioned again after that point, which I was expecting there to be some sort of Chekhov's watch thing happening with them. But,
Chekhov's watch.
But even though we didn't get that kind of payoff, I felt like that one little moment of possibly accidental lighting effect, that sold it for me. And maybe that didn't happen most nights of the show, in which case I just got a special treat that maybe nobody else even noticed. But now I share it with you all. It was fun for me. And
that is a beautiful moment to share. Thank you.
And if anybody is remounting this play, the scene with the watches is in there. See if you can beam some light off of that watch and see if it can kind of bat signal onto the wall of the stage, and if you can get some sort of poignancy from that.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else production-wise you wanted to talk about?
I mean, to be honest, the house
is a big one.
So beautiful. I mean, the one thing that bugs me more than anything else is Chekhov's roses. Because as you can see in the background here on the poster and throughout the whole play, they keep talking about the roses.
Yeah.
The roses that he spent so long tending to and caring for, and that basically that dictates his whole yearly schedule is what he's doing with these bloody roses. And I was so ready at the end when Fran dies, and that he's going to go out to that garden and just scream into the night and rip shit. Mm-hmm. That he didn't destroy the roses.
Like, I feel like we're supposed.
Why?
I feel like we're supposed to understand it that he did. Like, he's throwing soil, he's ripping shrubbery.
But he rips out other flowers.
I
not
know.
The roses.
And
I'm like, no. You set up the roses. You ripped the roses, unless they were real roses. Maybe that was something.
I kind of interpret it as the roses as props were probably too expensive to rip and have to replant before each performance. I don't know. Even with Mirvish's budget, there are limits. So I felt like when we saw him trampling the garden and doing all that stuff, that we're supposed to understand it as he's destroying the thing he loved most, his roses, his precious roses. But yeah, the fact that we didn't actually get to see that happen, I would agree. A little irksome.
It's a little irksome because, as Ryan and I both know, the theory of Chekhov's is if you set it up enough times, I want there to be some payoffs. And part of me was like, if Bob dies, do we then spread his ashes in the garden on his roses?
That would make sense.
That would also make sense.
Do not spread Fran's ashes in the roses. She did not like the roses.
Oh, God.
That would be so mean.
You could spread her under the tree. She loved that tree.
She loved the tree.
And I love the fact that they brought up in my Q&A that this was a tree from a Shaw production that season. They used the same tree. And that would have been transplanted over. Oh,
was it the one from Everybody? Because that had a big tree. Yeah, I didn't recognize it. I saw both of these productions. That's cool. That's fun.
Yeah, so it was one of the audience members caught that this was the same tree, and they did acknowledge that yes, this is the same tree from Shaw that is now being repurposed late down the road for another show. And so it's one of those great things of just the symbolism of the tree versus the garden is so well laid out that the garden is perfectly walled in, it's secure, it is perfectly maintained. Then you have this beautifully crooked tree that is not growing straight, but is kind of curving the way of life curves.
That Bob wants to get rid of, but Fran likes it and wants to keep it.
Correct. The symbolism of that is perfect.
There's a lot of foliage symbolism going on. Also, there's been so many shows with like a single tree lately. And oddly enough, not waiting for Godot specifically, which is the famous show with a single tree. Yeah. But like, yes, everybody at Shaw had things apparently the same tree, which I forgot. But Yerma very prominently had a single tree at Coal Mine.
Camelot's going to have a tree on Broadway.
Yeah, there you go.
That has a very famous tree.
I don't know if you saw the Palindrome show, as I keep forgetting the full title, the one that was at Can Stage, the Belgian company for 3 days only. That very prominently had a single tree that got destroyed and then rebuilt. So people
Braid has a tree on Broadway.
People love their single trees in plays. Yes. It's a thing. Here we go again.
It is a thing. But yeah, I mean, just the set was so stunning. Because once again, the fact that the minute you walk in, you see the set and you know exactly who this family is. This lived-in family. It's not a rich house. It's a very modern, but, kind of dated. The cabinetry isn't new. It's a basic kitchen table. The backyard's a little small. It's got a little garden, a little shed, a little tree, a bench. It tells you everything you need to know about this family right away, of who Bob and Fran are and how they keep their house. And just, the fact, I think they also have running water in the kitchen too.
Yeah, probably. They're making coffee in the machine.
They're making
that
coffee.
Bob doesn't want to learn how to
They have a fridge that lights up too.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that exactly when they walk off out of that kitchen set, it feels like they're walking up the stairs and into the second level of the house or to a living room. You feel that world that you could easily picture what is beyond that kitchen. It's brilliant. Yeah. So very good. Yeah, it's a very, very good set. Designed by Shannon Lee Doyle.
Nice. Good job, Shane.
So shout out to you, Shannon. Yeah. All right, Ryan. Since the show's already passed, we don't need to just kind of say we recommend it.
Yes, we recommend it. We both liked it. That said, I guess this is our transition into this next section where we kind of unpack more of the dramaturgy. I kind of maybe want to start with just a few little gripes I had, if that's all right.
Ryan, fire away. I give you full permission to go ahead.
Okay, one of them, like we've already talked about the opening monologue, or we've said our piece about that. Yeah. Another one, before we get into the main bigger discussion topics, is just something I'll say. This show did something in the writing that is a bit of a pet peeve of mine.
Okay.
And I think they did a better version of it than I'm used to seeing, but I nonetheless, it struck the, I don't love when plays or movies or TV shows do this thing.
Okay.
And that's when characters basically pause the conversation they're having to unpack the significance of song lyrics. I hate when things do that. And it's often done with Leonard Cohen, because of course it is, because he's a very poetic songwriter. We get it. But and Famous Blue Raincoat, like, I swear to God, is my favorite Leonard Cohen song. And I love Leonard Cohen. Everybody does, of course. But, like, I love that song so much. But I don't need the play to basically pause itself to unpack what do the lyrics of the song mean. It's just so unnecessary. It's holding your audience's hand through, some literary criticism is happening over here. And, like, I've been guilty of things like this in some of my very early playwriting, which I've, thankfully realized was cringy and moved away from.
Yeah.
But, like, This Is Us, for example, in one of the later seasons, did this very thing with a different Leonard Cohen song, So Long Marianne, and they were so proud of the scene they wrote about this that they made that the title of the episode, So Long Marianne. I just hate it. I hate it so much. It just irks me as a writer, as a dramaturg, as a playgoer. The conversation they had about the play, this is why I say this is maybe a slightly better version than usual, or sorry, about the song, the conversation they had was well done, because it wasn't just let us explain the thesis of the song and how it relates to our lives.
Yes.
Those meaningful connections were there, but it still kind of required the audience to suss it out based on the interpretation they spelled out pretty explicitly. Yes. So, there's worse versions of this. I don't hate it as it was done here, but I kind of just hate it on principle. And, you could just play the song.
You could.
Like, you play the song and let the audience think about, how does that... I literally, when I directed James Joyce's Exiles in, like, 2016, I included Famous Blue Raincoat in my pre-show music track just because I thought, hey, this song kind of reverberates thematically with some of the stuff going on in here, and I love it so much, and it gets me in the feels. Yeah. I didn't feel the need to stop the show to be like, okay, you're rewriting James Joyce so the characters can explain how their life is like Famous Blue Raincoat.
Right.
Anyway, sorry, that's a tiny irk I have.
Brian's got feelings on this, people.
It's just, I know it's stupid and irrational that I get so riled up by
it's a personal taste.
Yeah. Anyway, here's another thing, and this one could generate more of a discussion. I know the play is Australian.
Correct.
It is written in Australia by an Australian playwright and set in Australia. I get it.
Yes.
I was quite happy, I would say, that the actors, these Canadian actors, didn't just put on thick Australian accents.
That would be way too corny.
It would be very corny. But my question then becomes, was there ever a point in the development process of this Canadian production where somebody, whether it's the director or producer, somebody thought this could just be set in Canada? And if
I thought it was set in Canada too, because they talked about Pip going to BC.
Well, yeah. Well, the very
I thought, this is like suburban Ontario somewhere, or like suburban like East Coast, or
well, that's the thing. Like you mentioned that this feels very like America, or
yes,
like it could be Canadian. Basically, anywhere where there's white middle class suburbs, this play could happen.
Yes.
And so, but we are introduced to the fact that it is indeed Australia from that very opening monologue with Rosie, because she's like, well, I met Australian boys on my trip, but if I wanted to sleep with Australians, I could have stayed in Australia.
Yeah.
So then, we get all the, Mia's going to Sydney, Rosie's going to Brisbane. And, we get this, very interesting reference to Canada because Pip is going to Vancouver. And, there was an interesting conversation that happened in the post-show talkback where somebody asked, is why Leonard Cohen, and is that something? And it's just like, well, that's in the original play, but Canadians might resonate with that differently. Although Leonard Cohen pretty much is an international superstar that I think Canadians claim ownership, or should claim ownership over him, like we might be inclined to do. But yeah, so I guess go ahead.
I mean, in my Q&A, speaking of Q&As, they talked about how this play was Australian, and there was talk that how when they did this down in the States, or I think it was down in the States, they took out a lot more of the Australian stuff and kept it more North American. And then when they brought it to Canada, the playwright wanted to do kind of a hybrid where if you read the Australian version, it's heavy on the Australian isms, and more language stuff. And this one was kind of what they called the hybrid script, where it was toned down Australia, but was still set in Australia.
See, I feel like you can't have it both ways. Like, and that's the thing. Like, I don't. It's not saying I wanted to hear the accents, but it kind of just it felt every time they mentioned something Australian, you're like, oh right, this is Australia.
It does pull you out a bit.
Whereas they could have been living in anywhere in Canada, maybe even Vancouver, and Pip could have gone to Australia. Yeah, like that, and that could have just been a way to pay homage to the Australian original nature. It's the equal amount of distance away from Canada to Australia. Yeah, if we're just trying to say that we are oceans apart. Yeah, but like I'm just saying, there's, knowing that this American production allowed that, I just feel like that should be the standard operating procedure for wherever they relocate it to. Yeah, because
do some geography check, change a few names.
Well, and at least in the version we saw, which is maybe already toned down some of the Australianness, but aside from naming places, there's really nothing that I would say is inherently culturally Australian about this story. Yes. And so it kind of just doesn't feel necessary. And I feel like if you're not going to do the accents anyway, at least localize it to where it's happening. But I assumed that the playwright probably just took issue and like, no, this is an Australian story. But now hearing that the American production did that, I'm like, okay, so they could just do that anywhere. I don't know. Do you have more thoughts?
Maybe they felt because Canada was part of the Commonwealth, they were like, we can make it more Australian versus the Americans who will want it more Americanized. Either way.
Probably. Do you have more thoughts about that, or should we?
No, I think you're right. That I do agree that it did kind of throw me for a minute because when going in, because Seana and Tom and Alana as Rosie and the first few scenes were not speaking with Australian accents, but then they started talking about locations in Australia. I was like, wait a minute, where are we going here? What are we doing?
And I assume Nicole Kidman's miniseries will be in Australia with accents. so maybe when I watch that, whenever it comes out, I'll be like, oh, there is a lot more real localized stuff here. But if you're already going to neutralize it, then just go all the way. The hybrid version, it didn't kill the production by any means, but it was just like something that was kind of scratching my head at, like, why this? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you usually could have said it in Canada, BC, and then, like, even like, I remember my sister my younger sister did her post-secondary school in Ottawa. So she was 5 to 6 hours away versus my sister and I, who were in Toronto, who were like an hour away. And that was a big deal to my parents, that we can't just drive down and see you, Q. Like, it's going to be, be a day. Like it's a full-on day, overnight, come back type thing. And I mean, the fact that Rosie decides to go to, I think it's Brisbane,
which is further than Sydney, because she says she's going to visit Mia on her way over there.
Correct. So you usually could translate that to she's going down to Ottawa for school, or she's going out somewhere out east to Charlottetown or something. I don't know.
Yeah, because like Yerma, for example, the
Yeah.
coal mine production that we just reviewed, both the original Young Vic production on National Theatre at Home and the coal mine production here in Toronto, they took this very British adaptation of this very Spanish play and made it completely Canadian, localized to Toronto. And I really felt like the same treatment could have been done with this. And I
It's
feel
definitely open to that. For sure.
Well, I think
open to that.
with those kinds of things, there has to be a good reason not to, more than the inverse. So I don't know if I saw that good reason. That's just me on this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Ryan, I will let you introduce the next topic.
All right.
You were the one that put this on the map as something that you wanted to discuss.
I feel like this is my little negative section in the middle of the episode here, but this is I swear this is my last big gripe, and that we're going to get on to just cool philosophical discussions about the various things that got provoked here. Mia's trans coming out arc.
Yes.
I don't love the way that was handled, is what I will say, is just as my kind
In what way?
So, again, I know I'm a cis man. Like, if trans people or non-binary folks or other kind of gender non-conforming folks saw this and it meant something to them, I'm by no means trying to take anything away from anyone, maybe. Because I also have mixed feelings about this. I recognize that what I'm saying, I'm certainly not the voice of authority on the subject, nor would I ever claim to be. And that, other people's mileage will vary. And I've been struggling to put into words why I kind of disliked it as much as I did.
Okay.
But to me, I feel like on one hand, I believe that this is probably very true to a lot of people's experience. Trans people coming out to their boomer parents in this way. And, it was done that, they were already, Fran and Bob thinking that they're already pretty progressive, that I think our son is going to come out to us as gay, so just be ready. Right. He wants to have a big conversation with us. And they're already, even though they're expressing that they're going to be supportive, they're already expressing pretty kind of homophobic subtext to the way they're just talking to each other about this, that we all pray to God that this doesn't happen to our kids, but it did, so I guess we're going to be okay with it. Like, okay, that's, it's good that you're being okay with it, but clearly aren't, or you'll at least put on a brave face for your kid as if this is the worst thing that could possibly happen to you, that your kid just, discovers their sexuality. But then...
I interpreted that differently, but I will come back to that.
Okay.
I'll let you finish your thing first.
Okay, sure. So then Mia shows up and she wants to tell them that, she wants to come out as trans and tell them that she wants to start living as a woman. And that, Bob and Fran, while she's kind of like beating around the bush to kind of get it out, Bob and Fran are like, just so you know, there's nothing you can say that will surprise us.
And Bob puts his foot in his mouth.
Bob puts his big foot in his mouth and says, well, if you told us you wanted to become a woman, that would surprise us. And very awkward, because that's exactly what she had just come to say.
Correct.
I don't necessarily dispute that line in particular. It's a real awkward moment. And again, prefacing all of this with, I recognize that this probably is true to some people's experience. My kind of gripe with how all this was handled is that the way the conversation unfolded kept kind of oscillating back and forth between, are they okay with this or are they not? And the scene, which took us right to intermission,
correct,
basically ended with them, no, we are not okay with this, and we might never have a relationship with our child again because of this. Which, again, that's a thing that does happen. Yep. But
Act 2 opens with a very different thing where Bob has a moment in the airport.
Yeah, and like that, the moment at the airport is good. I like that. But we don't get to see Bob during that, which I didn't like that. That's completely...
We see him in the garden as we're being told what happened.
Yes, but I would have loved to actually see that moment dramatized. Right. But no, we just get it as a monologue. But yeah, we come into Act 2, and I sort of thought that, okay, well, this is the big thing they went to intermission on, that this is something that is going to propel a lot of the drama. Right. And then I felt like it was just very hastily resolved, might be the wrong word, but kind of then, okay, we have Mia goes to the airport. We have the monologue about how Bob behaved in the airport.
The watch scene.
The watch scene, of course, is part of it, but then it kind of just gets dropped as a plot point. And
Right.
I feel like that monologue about Bob isn't him coming to terms with it. It's just him awkwardly, clumsily trying to say goodbye to his child in this way, and whatever, he's grappling with it. But I guess the big thing that kind of is motivating a lot of my kind of icky feelings about this whole sequence is that the play does not seem to be taking the transphobic position, but it also doesn't necessarily reveal the folly of that position. And here's the thing, and this kind of, I feel like, at least in my viewing, it felt like the big elephant in the room to me. Look at me. I know I have a baby face. I'm pushing 30. I was the youngest person in that theater. I'm almost 30 years old, and I was the youngest person in that theater.
It's true. Yeah, I agree. At my show, I was one of the younger people in my section.
So to me, this felt like, even though the playwright is clearly not transphobic and is kind of pushing forward what I think he thinks is this, empowering pro-trans, character arc or journey in the play, it felt like it was making too many excuses for the parents from the perspective of their, knee-jerk, but nonetheless transphobic reaction to their child trying to share something important with them. And especially going to intermission right on that. I wasn't eavesdropping on anyone around me, so to speak, but I would bet that there's a lot of people in that audience, people who fancy themselves progressive, we're going to see a theater, we are liberals, probably during intermission, had conversations about, could you imagine if that was my kid? Or, I wouldn't like... The demographic of this play is already very much in the older. Bob and Fran older headspace. And since the play itself does not seem to share that position, I felt like it could have done more to argue against it. And Mia herself, understandable in her emotional state, but nonetheless comes out pretty confrontational, as I'm sure a lot of older people view their millennial and maybe even Gen Z children and grandchildren. That like, you can't be reasoned with, you're just so too woke, oh my god, SJWs, pronouns this, pronouns that. It very much felt like it was in that not quite Tucker Carlson level batshit nonsense, but very much in that old curmudgeonly, I don't understand what the youths are doing and I don't like it kind of position. And to go to intermission on that and give all of the old people in the audience a chance to discuss that before the play actively rebuts that knee-jerk reaction, and then, in my opinion, doesn't do a great job of eventually rebutting it. Just the fact that it doesn't get addressed much after the airport monologue kind of means that they're implicitly okay with it, but not insofar as they don't address it. Like, it feels like Tevye telling Chava that she's dead to him. Like, again, if we're going to go with the analogs of what I felt like this play was doing, whether intentionally or not. And sure, we get the, God be with you moment at the end of Fiddler.
Yeah.
This
Which is like the airport scene.
That's the airport scene. But the relationship is not repaired. It's just a brief acknowledgement that you're still my child, I guess.
Yes. I
don't understand you. I don't want to understand you. Our lives will be forever apart. And thankfully, Mia comes back for the funeral and they have the big hug. She's part of that. And I'm glad that, it's not full Chava where we're like, okay, you're staying here. We'll never see you again. But I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way. And I think a lot of that has to do with how I think it was presented to this particular audience, but full well knowing that this is the target audience who's going to see a Mirvish show.
Okay. Wow.
Sorry,
there's a lot there.
What were your thoughts about this element?
Yeah. Okay. So going in, because for many sorts of reasons, my uncle got confused with what theater we were at. He thought we were at the Ed Mirvish Theater, sponsored by CA, not the CA Theater. So
very confusing venues.
It is. They should work on those names. But anyway, so point being is, we didn't have a ton of time when we got into the theater to sit down and read the program. Like, I glanced through it, but I never caught that in the program, Michael's Dio's name is Mia.
Yes.
So I did not know about the reveal of
You're introduced to a character named Mark, and you just assume this character is
Correct.
Mark. Yes.
Well, see, so Michael, who is a wonderful performer, who we didn't really talk about much in our cast shoutouts, but they were wonderful.
Yeah.
So, but it was very clear from the first time they spoke that they are a member of the LGBTQIA community.
Mm-hmm.
So, my brain automatically went to, okay, what is their storyline going to be? And right away I went to, okay, we're going to go with the coming out story, because they set up in the first scene of, he lost his girlfriend, they lost their girlfriend, who we all really liked, Taylor, whatever her name was. Anyway, so basically it's like, okay, we're going to get a coming out story. And then we get the scene in the backyard of Mark wants to come over, and I think he's going to come out to us, and the parents going, oh, okay, yeah. And then of course we get the turn of Bob putting his foot in his mouth, because you realize it's not just a coming out, it's a transitioning announcement. And what I loved about the scene is that it wasn't Hallmark. It wasn't a big kumbaya, oh, we accept you, we love you. Because one of the things I think gets missed, now mind you, I've not had anybody in my family come out as transgender and want to transition. So I preface this with this, but what I will say is that when there is a transition, as they say, there is a dead name, meaning that they are transitioning away from one person to another person at that point. They are evolving into their being that they want to be. But in the process, that former person kind of has to die, has to be let go of. And it's not a funny thing, but one of the things that this scene brought back to me is Keeping Up with the Kardashians, of all things. Go with me for a minute. So when Caitlyn Jenner came out, obviously the Kardashian season, even though I never watched the Kardashians, but this was a clip that went around on the internet, is that after Caitlyn came out, they then followed up with Kris Jenner. And one of the things was Khloe goes over to see Kris, and she's cleaning out Caitlyn's, formerly Bruce's, clothing. And she stops and smells one of his suits and says, it smells like him. And she's treating it like he's dead. Now, she's full on accepted Caitlyn. They had a whole other meeting up in the episode, blah, blah, blah. Discussed his tell-all book, whatever. But the point of that scene is that while we all were praising Caitlyn for coming out and becoming the woman she wants to be, one of the things that Pine got forgotten about was Caitlyn was married to Kris Jenner. They had a life, a family, and now that was all ending. And she, according to her, really had no kind of heads up of, I'm unhappy, I'm ending this, I'm moving out, I'm going away. It was kind of just a blip and it's gone. And kind of the knee-jerk reaction is, oh my God, I'm losing my husband. I'm losing my person who I can smell the clothes on them. I can smell the cologne. And Fran and Bob's reaction to Mia's coming out of, they're losing their son. As much as if somebody came out to me, I would absolutely be supportive of them. I would not have the same reaction as they did, but as parents, I could see a bit of where they were reacting from because Fran being a nurse, they set her up as a nurse, where she says she's seen some of these transitions take place already. And she knows what's going to happen to her. Like her youngest son, her son who's said to have had her looks, her beauty, and that it's all going to be changed. I can see her reaction and why she reacted in such a way. Even though I don't agree with it, I understood the issue there. And what I liked is that it wasn't resolved, in that when she dies, Fran, Mia says, I wish my mom and I could have, makes me sad, could have had a chance to better reconcile and meet and understand. Wow, God, that's really hitting me. Oh my God, didn't hit me in the theater, but now it's hitting me. Is the fact that she goes, I wish my mom could have seen me now and see me at my full transition. And we could have had a better relationship at that moment, because Fran doesn't go to the airport. As far as we know, Fran never got a proper goodbye. We say that she cried at the door and never kind of got to say the final words because she couldn't deal with it in the moment. And Bob was the one that went to the airport and had the emotion of saying goodbye to his child in one way, because he knew coming back, Mia was never going to be Mark again. The child that he had worked in the garden with, that had hidden the tree from him, was never coming back. You know, so for me, I went, as much as I would have loved a deeper, happier resolution to that storyline, part of me was kind of happy we didn't get that because it felt more natural, felt more like life of when somebody dies, when something happens. It isn't always hallmarky where it all is kumbaya, we accept you, we love you. Like one of the things my dad said was, because once again, he is a boomer. He is around Bob's age in his mid-60s. You know, he said, I understood a bit of what the parents were going through there, because he goes, as much as I would love and accept you, Mac, if you came out and said you wanted to transition into a woman or a female identifying person, he goes, you are my only son. You are my eldest child. And as much as I would love and support you, there would also be a piece of my heart that would feel like I was actually losing the child that I knew. You know, and I went, okay, interesting observation there. So for me, I just went, as much as, once again, this, like in a happier, in a different play, maybe there would have been a whole second act of just focusing on this one child storyline and maybe the siblings reacting to it more. Who knows? But because they were trying to kind of keep 4 characters going, they kind of had to quickly wrap up that one story so we could get to Ben's storyline and still get into Fran and Bob's storyline of settling versus not settling, you know? So
yeah. No,
anyway, once again, I threw a lot at you. So.
No, I hear what you're saying, and I think you're bringing interesting perspectives. I was not expecting this to be a Kardashian discussion, so thanks for bringing that in.
I didn't think it either until I was leaving the theater and went, right, there was that scene of Kris Jenner breaking down, donating Bruce's suits and clothing, and her stopping and smelling as if he had actually died and she had buried him in the ground somewhere. And like any couple goes into their person's room and smells the clothes as a memory thing. It's like my mom holding my grandmother's sweater after the funeral and going, it smells like her. I can smell the pine chest. I can smell the perfume.
So I guess like my response to everything you're saying, which I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe this is similar to what I always say about Tevye with Chava. Like, I don't buy that. The whole "you're dead to me" is such a destructive way of looking. And I'm not saying that Fran and Bob think Mia is dead to them, but just this idea.
Mia's not dead to them. Mark is dead to them in some ways.
But
because
Mia,
they're not going to call Mia Mark anymore.
No, but Mia and Mark are the same person. Mark, we could argue that Mark was always Mia and just needed to discover that, and that's, I think, how most trans people can't speak for this community like it's a monster.
Was it weird two cis males?
No, but I think that is more consistent with a lot of the experience of certainly trans people I know and I'm friends with. That you realize something has been wrong my whole life. Oh, this is it. I've always been this person, and I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out. But
I think one thing that would have helped in this is if either Rosie or find the box of donation clothes that Rosie and Mia were going through, and they have a moment together. Yeah, with the clothes, acknowledging the change that's going to happen in a more positive way. That maybe that would have helped and would have added on something. To me, I think there's a difference between mourning a possible version of a life or your life that, yes, I thought you were a man. I was clearly mistaken. Yeah. And I envisioned a version of your life where you were a man and maybe married a nice girl or a nice boy, no judgment either way, but and realizing that the version of that life that you envisioned is no longer the case and you can mourn that. I call bullshit when we turn that into mourning of the person. And I know the language of dead naming maybe implicitly implies that, but I don't really think that's, to each their own, but that's maybe a destructive way of looking at it. This person is dead and a new phoenix has risen in the ashes in their place. That, this is fundamentally the same person who is now happier because they've made a big discovery about themselves. And if the play would have done more to gesture in that direction, I think it would have been stronger and wouldn't have, you kept saying me personally, I don't agree, but it's true to life because my parents would feel something like this or other people like it. And I think that's the problem, that we're trying so hard to galvanize that position that we're not galvanizing the thing we actually agree with is that's not an okay way to react. And again, it feels true to life, sure, but
I've talked about this on a few panels before, but we've done so well in like a lot of media lately, and like specifically media targeted at children, which is amazing. This kind of trend towards post-closetness, that a character comes out as gay or trans or non-binary, and nobody in the world of these stories bats an eye at it. And ideally, you can watch that. Like, you know, I just watched Strange World, the Disney movie, where it's very much had that kind of thing where, you know, the gay young man, not only are his parents totally cool with how gay he is, but he meets his long-lost grandfather who's been trapped in a distant world, you know, for a long time. And he's also doesn't bat an eye at the fact that the person you have a crush on is a boy. Like, it's totally cool. I love that. And people can watch it and be like, that's so not true to my experience of coming out to my grandparents. But it's a utopian vision of what we want our society to look like, what this progress should ultimately be building towards. And as honest as the portrayal we get in plays like this might be, giving it as much credence, the arguments that they make, giving that credence, feels like a step in the wrong direction in the year of our Lord 2023. That's why I think it bugs me a little bit. Despite my recognizing why it feels like an appropriate set of decisions from a writing perspective. I mean, there's so much more we could get into with this, but I also feel like we need someone from the transgender community on here to get of course.
More like, because you're right, they do have the term dead name, which does imply that it is a phoenix rebirth type thing versus.
Well, and I think
I don't know. Like, what's
the reason why? I think the reason why
that
language of dead naming probably exists specifically to just kind of communicate the severity of you don't call this person this anymore. That there can be trauma tied up with that. It's not polite just because you always knew them as that doesn't make it okay for you to not respect their new name. And if we need to put it in very fatalistic language to kind of communicate that, to make that clear to some people, I'm all for that. But I think, what we're talking about here is just sending the wrong message of this person is dead and a new person is taking their place when they are just, you know, different trajectories, plot points in the journey of this one person's life. I mean, I don't know what I have to say. I think we can kind of put this topic to rest, but I felt like it needed to be addressed.
I do agree there should be at least one more scene, either between Fran and Rosie or Fran and Bob, that gave a bit more resolution on the Fran side of this, because she has such an aggressive reaction at the end of Act 1 to this announcement. More than Bob. Like, Bob pleads, but it's Fran who has...
pleading is the part that actually kind of irked me even more. Fran's reaction was bad. But his, like, can you do me a favor and not do this, son? Like, that... Again, like, the whole conversation in the scene was so weird because they kept jostling back and forth towards, like, I think they're going to get it. They just need a little time. But then they just said something so much worse, both of them. And, it's...
Which, I mean, I don't mind that the coming out scene is rough and people put their foot in their mouth and nobody reacts the way they should. That didn't bother me. It was, I agree. Like, I would have loved one more scene in Act 2 where we got a bit more resolution of some kind.
I think if we had that, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now, or it would have been a much shorter conversation.
Nicole Kidman, when you do the miniseries, add that scene in to pad out those 6 episodes.
Maybe that's part of the plan. That's why they're like, we really need a 6th episode to do this justice.
Yes. There we go. Okay, the next question is one that I came up with.
Yeah, cool. You want to get started on this?
Yes. So this is something I actually talked to my dad about when we were outside of the theater waiting, was because my dad always gets on me about symbolism and how he goes, general audiences don't always pick up on all the symbolism because we're only hearing the play for the first time. And there's a lot of symbolism that goes right over our heads. And one of the symbolisms I pointed out was that on the cover, as you can see, let me zoom in here a bit. Yeah, there we go. As you can see, Fran has a live set of bouquet of roses, while Bob is holding a dead set of roses, which I then in turn implied that Bob ain't making it out of this play alive. That something's going to happen to Bob, and that he's going to end up under the roses, pushing up the roses, as it were. And then at the end, it's not the case, and it's Fran who is the one who doesn't make it out at the end. So Ryan, with your wonderful playwriting dramaturgy skills being put to use here, what does this twist ending of the play reveal, or how does it contradict the image of the program? Because you don't choose an image like this for shits and giggles.
You don't choose it by accident, that's for sure.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a very clear reason of why this image was chosen.
Yeah.
So, what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this kind of for the past few days since we drafted up these like cursory questions, and I don't know if I have a good answer because like part of me feels like it could just be as simple as, oh, it is this bait and switch. Anyone who looks at this image will think they figured it out. And like, is that it? Is there more to that? Are we, are we justified in trying to give it more thought than that? Part of me looking at this image, we can maybe interpret it as like an inverse way, is that Bob is the one who's going to be left after the thing he loves dies, or the person he loved died, left holding and picking up the pieces. But then I don't know how we would interpret the inverse of that, of her holding on to life.
Right.
I don't know. That was a thought that occurred to me, but it doesn't really feel fully fleshed out. Part of me... Yeah, do you have a thought?
I mean, my thought was that it symbolizes the fact that at the beginning of this play, regardless of how it ends, is Bob is stuck in a rut and is, for better terms than not, he is kind of just spinning his wheels and is kind of just dead. While Fran, who is in the prime of her life, is very much the live roses who are in full bloom. She's wanting to travel. She has this money set aside. She is ready to kind of hit this prime of her life and do something with it. And how kind of by the end, she's the one that ultimately doesn't get to kind of live that life that she intended to live. And in turn, Bob is the one that'll kind of have to pick up the live roses and carry them forward. I don't know. That's like, something that I interpreted as like, what could this mean? Because I left going, crap, well, that kind of throws my symbolism monologue that I gave my dad out the window.
Well, no, like the symbolism is valid. And I think, it's very potent to not just have symbolism in the play, but hand every member of the audience, here's some symbolism for you. Take this home and think about it after the show's over. But another thought that occurred to me is, again, these are all half thoughts because I didn't come to any good conclusions, anything, but maybe this image isn't signifying which character dies, but it's kind of just something of the, the anti-Midas touch of everything you touch dies, and maybe Bob's kind of destructive influence at this stage in his life, rudderless as you put it. He's having trouble keeping things alive. His relationships with his children are mostly fraught, or at least with two of his children. The other two are
two
kind
of his
fine,
children.
But...
Two of them he's good with.
Yeah.
Pip
so
and
like,
Rosie,
again,
it's his sons that he doesn't do well with.
Yeah.
Or his son and his daughter, Mia.
Well, yes. Yeah. So, like, it doesn't really feel right, even that interpretation. I don't know. And he's the gardener. He's the one who takes care of the roses. He loves the roses.
Right? That's another thing where it's like...
He has the green thumb, and she's the one who wants to... She's the one who wants to tear them up. Now, he does supposedly tear them up at the end. We already discussed how does he, though? But... It
wasn't really in the show. It's implied, but not really.
It's implied, so then maybe this is foreshadowing how he will, rest the roses and they will lie dead in his hands at the end, whereas Fran goes to her death still in the prime of her life and things are still blooming around her. She has all of these thoughts about how she wants to reconnect with all of her kids. I don't know. It's a striking image, but
it is.
As much as I spun my wheels, I couldn't come up with a good answer for you.
All right. Well, the next question though does lead off of this question, and I will add a caveat to this question that you don't know.
Okay.
But I will add a caveat, which is the first question is: does the death of Fran set Bob up to break out of his retirement rut this play finds him in? And my second question is: do we think Fran's death was the accident as it is described in the play, that she kind of dozed off at the wheel for a minute and then she lost her control of the car, which then in turn hit the divider, flipped, and she dies in a very kind of traumatic collision? Do we think that
the death of a salesman interpretation?
That right? Which ties back...
I recognized that glimmer in your eye when you said, "Ooh, we'll come back to this." I'm like, this is the question where that'll probably be the case.
So here you go. So fire away. Answer the two questions.
Okay. Man. Again, I feel like I have boring answers, but at least these ones I've thought through enough. I'm like, these feel like reasonable conclusions. Yes. Maybe not the death of a salesman one, because you just threw that at me, but there's certainly the first part. I will say no. I don't think that Fran's death is going to break Bob out of the rut that he's been in post-retirement. And a few reasons for that. But the first one is, correct me if I'm wrong, because we wrote these questions after we watched it, so I didn't go in with this in mind specifically, but Bob does not say a single other word or verbalized line after hanging up the phone. He kind of grunts and yells in the guard, like kind of...
Yeah, he doesn't say anything.
He doesn't say a word, and then the children narrate...
Are the ones that... they have to get them dressed and...
Yeah, they get dressed, they narrate how it relates to each of them specifically, they narrate what happened to Fran, and then it ends on a silent group hug as they all leave. Famous Blue Raincoat, of course, is playing in the background. But
Brian's favorite song!
It's a great song, but and if they had just let it play in the background in various poignant moments, that would have been something. Anyway, we're not doing that again. But Bob never speaks again after this. And, while we don't get to see him go through the full stages of grief.
That's the sequel play.
Well, that's the sequel play, but I kind of feel like, no, his life is over. He's broken. This woman has been his whole life, and she's just gone. And as terrible as it is to sit at someone's bedside while they are dying of some kind of long protracted disease like cancer or something, at least you start acclimating yourself to the end when that happens, whereas something as sudden as a car crash, they're an older couple, they had to be recognizing that eventually you will die or I will die, one of us is going to die first. You can't prepare for something like this. It's too sudden, and it's just life shattering.
Well, he's expecting her to come home, and they say as much. Where it's like, yes, I don't think they even say "I love you" when she leaves. I think it's just casseroles in the fridge.
Yeah, they have the banter about the garden.
Steven's coming over with the kids to pick up the dinner I've prepared for them. I'll be home late tonight because I'm working a night shift. I'll see you later. Yeah,
they have the banter about how she wants to rip up all of his roses.
Yes, that's right.
Fucking creepers.
Yes.
Which the second that conversation started, I'm like, one of you is gonna die soon. Like
nobody talks about the future that way.
No, didn't know which one it was gonna be yet, but I'm just like, but
one of you is not gonna make it.
But also because we hadn't yet returned to that phone call from the beginning.
Right.
I was starting to predict, I think it's her. Like, I was still waiting to see if there was another thing with the phone call, but felt like we are barreling towards the end. And, but I have seen 2 instances I have lost all 4 of my grandparents.
Right.
But in each instance where one of them goes, the other did not have much quality of life until eventually they also went. And in both cases of my grandparents, it was within a couple years of their partner. And those are just very sad years. You lose this person who's been so important to you, and you fall back on your children, your now adult children, who you can kind of turn to, and they'll take care of you. They have a very nice group hug. Despite the turmoil that we've seen unfold, they're still there for you. You're there for them. Yeah. But he's not going to get a spring in his step and be like, well, Fran would have wanted me to go to that national park in South Africa, so now I'm going to do it. He's done. Like, we don't need a sequel play to tell us that, nor do I think a sequel play in which they prove me wrong is very appropriate to, if we're talking about being true to life as we were in the last question or a couple questions ago. Very much I don't see that future for him. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think the play wisely doesn't give us that because it recognizes that this kind of is life ending, and that's normal.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have alternate thoughts before we get into the
question
suicide?
about Fran?
Again,
in her death, was it accidental, or is it something that she actively did?
Okay,
realizing that maybe Bob wasn't going to change enough, and she was kind of going to be trapped.
Okay, boring answer. I would have to really comb over the lines of I think it was Rosie narrating the sequence of thoughts that goes through her mind.
Yeah,
I would have to
basically say she's just overworked. She's tired. The family drama gets too much for her, and basically she kind of has a moment of rubbernecking at the wheel. Yeah, which then in turn leads to the crash into the guardrails. And
so I have the answer that I think is things I know to be true, things I think to be true, but maybe rereading these lines would give me a different perspective. But I think it was an accident. She's overworked. She's tired. And one of the last thoughts that goes through her head, or one of the last 4 thoughts to go through her head, is, I have unfinished business with each of my children, and I want to take some kind of step to fix that. And that doesn't seem like the kind of thought you have where, like, on second thought, I could just ram into this median and kill myself. Right. Like, I think we would have needed to be given more dramaturgically, thematically, playwriting-wise, to justify if we are supposed to not necessarily be told that, but even to interpret it that way. I think it feels like a stretch based on the evidence we're given. But maybe you notice something else. What are your thoughts about both of these questions?
Oh boy. Okay, so I'll try and move this through because we're getting almost to 2 hours of conversation. So I agree with you that I don't think Bob radically changes and decides he's going to go travel the world, because we know his pensions run out. They were surviving off Fran's money, basically. And we know that any money she squirreled away, in case she ever had to leave Bob or whatever, got split 4 ways because Bob insisted that whatever Ben gets, which we'll get into in a minute, all 4 of the other children get. And Fran makes a clear point of saying, well, there won't be much left for us.
Yeah, so it's pretty much gone. We can safely assume that the money's gone.
Yes. So maybe Fran has a nurse's pension. I don't know how the Australian healthcare system works, but I know up here, the nurses do have a pension plan that would probably cover this type of situation. Anyway, so because he's not going to have a ton of money, and probably is going to be living off Fran's, what I imagine is small pension or pension as a nurse, probably going to sell the house. He's going to downsize into something that's smaller, maybe a condo, maybe a retirement home, something where basically he is not going to magically start backpacking through South Africa. Even though, as much as I would love him to, I think that'd be a beautiful end to him arriving at that national park. Maybe that's the Nicole Kidman ending. Who knows? But it's one of those things where, like, I remember my dad saying that so his mom died when my dad was 10. She died in childbirth with my uncle. So basically, my dad said after that, my dad was rudderless. He would come in out from days at the farm and just feel like he had gone in a circle. And he would stare out the kitchen window at the sink for hours sometimes. And, that's what I picture Bob doing.
Yeah.
Bob just sits and stares at that damn tree that's over his garden that drops leaves. And he just looks at that and just doesn't quite know how to pick himself up and get himself to move forward. Now, the only maybe good thing is that this death of Fran brings Pip back to her husband. Yeah. And then he has Pip and Stephen, who we never actually meet. Who actually would be an interesting character to have on stage.
I think we heard enough about him that we get his deal. We didn't
anyway, so yeah, but if Pip and Stephen are around, maybe they're the ones that are looking after him. Maybe Ben comes over and looks after him too, while Rosie and Mia are off doing their own thing elsewhere. I don't know. But that's one of those things where it's like, I just don't see Bob magically coming out of his rut. Because the grief of losing someone so suddenly and so painfully, so violently too, like she had a heart attack in her sleep and just never woke up. No, they full on, like, she drives into a guardrail, a cement guardrail, and like smashes the car and flips it. Like, it is not a pleasant, like, this was not an open casket funeral, basically, is what is implied. So, that's right there is why I don't think that Bob gets over this very quickly, because it's one thing to lose somebody in their sleep and it's a peaceful, sad thing, but when it's ripped away from you so suddenly and so violently, I think the trauma of that on someone like Bob, who is so kind of even-keeled, kind of putters in his garden, with Fran being the driving force of that, wearing the proverbial pants of that partnership.
The scrubs,
The scrubs. She wears a lot of scrubs. That when you lose your rudder like that, the real rudder of that family, it's very hard to move forward unless somebody comes out and there and really kicks your ass and says, okay, you got to go. And my dad acknowledges, like, when his mom died, his dad never found that rudder the same way.
Yeah, most people
and went in circles. A lot of people don't.
Especially if it happens that late in life, and you're kind of left. Yeah.
And I mean, as for Fran's accident or suicide, at the time, I thought, okay, it was an accident because of Rosie's very vivid description of the accident. But at the same time, she says the accident report people implied this is what likely happened. Now, we can't test for fatigue. There is no blood test you can take. They're working on getting a blood test for people who drive fatigued, but that's not something that we have now. So part of me can go, because we have the conversation, prior to that scene of them them disagreeing a bit of what are we going to do? Do we rip up the garden? Do we keep the garden? And Bob insisting that no, we keep it as is. We've also had the scene before where Fran talks about settling for the sake of the children in their marriage and not getting up and going when her and Bob were kind of at a crossroads of that we're not really happy, but we're here. That type of thing. So it's one of those things where she's already kind of implied that she stayed for the children, but now that the children are all grown and on their own, it's one of those things of what else is Fran holding on to? Because clearly they've lost the money that she set aside for them to go do something because of Ben's actions, and then Bob insisting that every child gets the same. So she has no more money to go after it and do something she wants to do, which implies that she's just going to be working the rest of her life just to survive in a marriage that she is not implying that she's unhappy in, but she's saying that she's settled in. And maybe she's not getting as much fulfillment as she would have loved to in life. And her husband's just said to her again, I don't want to change my roses. I don't want to rip up my garden that I've worked so hard to tend and it looks perfectly manicured.
I feel like you're maybe reading a bit too much into the emotional weight of that beat
maybe.
In particular.
Yes, but it's the whole... But for me, I can see an interpretation of if the actress playing Fran when she leaves that scene, I think Shauna played it as this is going to be an accident. But I think the playwright gives enough hints that if the actress playing Fran chooses to play it in a different way, there is something there versus Willie Loman, who is very clearly has stated that this is death by suicide.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's a very different circumstance.
Very different circumstance.
Sorry, we have a couple more questions to get to, but just two quick thoughts to...
Two quick thoughts, go.
Well, you did. One of them, something that I think has occurred to me is that because Rosie is the one who narrates the sequence, she gets a lot of unfettered access to her mother's thoughts the moment before her death, something that could have never been reported to her.
Right.
Now, I think when the children do kind of step forward in their light and just monologue like that, we are supposed to view it as some kind of omniscient God's eye perspective. But intermittent with that, we have each of them talking about their own lives and, Pip saying that, that was the moment when I realized that this had to end and I had to come home. And well, that's not an omniscient perspective. That's very much you. Yeah. So I would say, again, without having poured over those lines in this detail, the fact that Rosie is narrating this thing that she couldn't possibly know could give us a narratological basis for casting doubt on her version of events. So that's, I can, while I still don't think this is the case, I could kind of give you that to justify this interpretation.
Maybe Nicole Kidman, when she does it, will have entirely a different interpretation.
Maybe. Thing number
maybe
2.
We'll actually see the accident too, and it will be one of those things of...
I feel like a film version probably would exactly show you the accident, and it would maybe be more, in that character's headspace or focalization to kind of show what Fran is going through in this moment. Thing number 2, and it'll be very quick. Yes, we don't have a blood test that can test for fatigue, but a nurse doing night shifts, she's fatigued.
It is hard.
We don't need a test to tell us that. She's done it a long
time too.
I
know.
It's not
like maybe she slept at the hospital before because she's tired, because she knows that there's a nursing station bed for overnight or to rest up before she goes on the drive. So I don't know. There's a lot of things there. There's a lot of things we can get in the comments section if anyone has more thoughts that we haven't thought of. Yeah. If the playwright wants to comment on this and say whether or not
I refuse to take authorial intent as a declaration of certainty, but anyway,
all right. Next question.
Get down in the comments. Yeah.
All right. Next question is about the scene that you talked about at the beginning, all about Ben.
Yeah.
Where he has been embezzling money, and once again, in a little bit of a Hallmarky kind of quick resolution fashion, Fran goes, "I have the money to pay back the money you've stolen, and that should resolve you from going to jail," even though really that's not the case. If you embezzle, you're going to jail, whether or not you pay back.
Well, the play at least justifies it on the grounds that he says that they just want their money. If I can get it back for them, they might not press charges, and we aren't presented with any evidence to the contrary, regardless of what would happen in real life.
Yeah, a bit Hallmarky, but anyway, point being is, it's in that scene, actually, this is actually a good Chekhov gun setup where
Yeah, I was just going to say.
at the beginning of the play, in one of the earlier scenes, Fran has already set up that she has set money aside for her and Bob to go off and do some traveling or to do something special in their golden years. And then as it comes out in this scene where Bob goes, wait, what money? Because I never knew
you've
about
been doing some skimming too. So it's a clever parallel between
it is.
child
It's a
and
very
mother.
good parallel. So then we find out, and Fran says that she will not see her son, who she has favored, go to jail, and that she will give him the money to pay it off. And this kind of sparks a whole other debate, which we'll get into in the next question, between Bob and Fran. But basically, the first question that we have here is, should Fran have given Ben the money? Ryan.
All right. I want to hear what you have to say first, because this is a you question that
Fair
think you have strong thoughts about. Well, probably more so than
she
I
shouldn't
do.
have. Send Ben to jail. Bob is absolutely right. They gave him a moral compass of stealing is wrong. We have told you that from the beginning. We gave you, we don't have much. I was a blue-collar worker, but one thing I did give you was good morals. He never cheats on his wife. He never hits his wife. And he gave him good morals to live by. Ben has lied about his background to his colleagues. He has skimmed money from them. And he should rightfully so pay the consequence, which is you go to jail for embezzling. Mommy doesn't get to bail you out just because she has the money. That is money that Fran has put in long hours at nursing for, and that she has set aside for. Now, what she set aside for originally was a very different situation, but she has now said, I want to put this money aside for traveling to, and as Bob says, I want to go to that South African national park. And Fran's like, let's go. I got the money. Let's do it. Actually, sorry, she doesn't say she has money. She says, we'll find the money and we will make it happen.
Just
not letting him know where the money's going to come from.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point is that they have a plan for that money that they both, Fran, worked hard for in life. And now to throw it all away on a son who, as Bob rightfully pointed out, threw away the most invaluable thing, more than money in the world, is a good moral compass that a good parent gave you, and that you were ashamed of your blue-collar background, so you decided to go play with the big boys, and in turn you got in too deep and too big for your britches, and you stole. You don't get to be bailed out with hard-earned money that your mom worked her ass for, doing an honest day's job. So, plain and simple, Ben go to jail.
So, all I'll say to that, and I don't have strong thoughts about this or really strong opinions.
I was so mad when Fran gave him the money.
I will agree with you on the kind of basic point that, I don't like Ben very much. He's
a dick.
Up. He messed up. I love Daniel. He did a great job playing this character.
Daniel did a great job playing this role.
But Ben can go rot in jail. Yes, he was, it wasn't Jean Valjean stealing bread to feed his family. He just wanted to be a big shot. He doesn't
wanted the fancy sports car. He wanted to shove stuff up his nose.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of make a moral argument for anything he did. Mm-hmm. The only kind of counterpoint I would make is in the phrasing of this question, should Fran have given Ben the money? Not would you give Ben the money, but should Fran? I don't know if I'm in a position to say what Fran should do with the money she saved, that if it's more important to her that her son not go to jail, regardless of whether or not he deserves to, then, everything else she planned to do with it. And keeping in mind that she wasn't expecting to have to split it up into 4, so when she made that promise, she probably still expected that she would have a little left over.
Yeah, but Bob is absolutely right.
No, I agree with Bob that
you give your child $2,050.
No, I agree. There's a whole conversation.
Or $250,000.
There's a whole scene earlier with Fran and Rosie where they talk about of course, Ben's my favorite child. Every parent has a favorite child, whether or not they'll admit it. But I completely agree with Bob to split it up, favoritism. But if Fran has saved up her whole life to have this money, by the same token that it's hers to leave Bob if that's what she so chooses. With that money, this money is hers. She earned it. She worked hard for it. She worked hard to keep it when it could have just wasted away into the mortgage fund. And whether or not there's a morally dubious element to that is a whole separate question that we don't need to unpack. But she, as much as I don't like Ben as a character, and I think he does deserve to face consequences for what he's done, I cannot think from the perspective of the mother that, how much is it worth it to you that your child not go to jail? Then again, it's white collar crime. He would have gone to like a fancy jail with tennis courts, probably. He would have been fine, but like,
I mean,
whatever.
For me, the only reason why I think Fran is so willing to give Ben the money is because this comes in Act 2 after the fallout with Mia, where in Fran's eyes, she's already lost one son, who's now transitioning and is not actively there anymore, for whatever word we want to use. But Mark is gone, Mia is there, but in Fran's eyes, she has lost a son in this process. And now she's threatened, and now she's facing the prospect of losing a second child after already, on top of that, losing Pip to Vancouver.
To the lure of Canada.
Exactly, to the lure of Canada. But it's one of those things of, that's the only reason why I can kind of justify where she goes, I can't lose another child.
No, and I think like it's there is no other hand kind of moment, I guess, like that. Yes, she, you know, it is well positioned in the arc of the plot that if it had come up earlier, then maybe she would have had a very different tune. Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, it is explicitly stated that Ben is her favorite child, and I don't think she would let him go to prison if there was anything she could do to help it at any point in the plot. But I think you're right, that did add stakes for her in this moment.
Yeah. Either way. All right, so this now leads into the final question you and I have come up with.
Let's do it.
Which is one that gets into the debate that follows this big reveal of the money between Ben and Fran, or Bob and Fran, which is, should marriage be about settling versus going for one's own desires, as we see the differences between Fran and Pip, as Pip is set up as following her desire with this Canadian educator, while Fran chose when she had the choice to get out, she had the money, and she had someone that she was nursing at the time that she could have left with, done something with, but she chooses, no, I have a family, I'm going to settle for what I have and make this work as best I can. So the question is, should marriage be about settling versus chasing one's own happiness, as it were? So the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few. Ryan, as someone who's, as you and I both talked about before we recorded that, my parents have been married 31 years. Yours have been married a few more years ahead of them. So we both seen marriages have their ups and downs, like in any life. There are good years, there are tougher years of marriage that you have to get through. Where do you stand on this concept of settling versus desire?
Yeah, like, how do you even answer this? It's like the play does.
Jill, are you watching? Ryan's going to give an opinion here.
The play does a good job of, I think, presenting both sides of this very well, that you can understand where Pip comes from when she makes the decision to leave, and you can understand where Fran comes from when she unpacks why she didn't. And yeah, I think it's interesting because they're not exact parallels as they are presented in the play here, because the person who Fran briefly considered having some kind of, whether you call it an affair or a tryst or whatever, but some kind of emotional departure from her stable family life to be with, was a terminally ill patient.
That's right. Yes.
So there isn't a clear future or even like much of a prospect of a future there. Now, that doesn't negate the feelings she felt for this person, but yeah, and you know, you can make an argument that Pip is in a similar situation, not that her lover is going to die, but she knows that there isn't a future for this relationship because she can tell that it's a pipe dream that he'll leave his wife for her. So yeah, you can make the arguments on either side there. Like, I think why this is such a difficult question to answer is that there's no one size fits all solution, and it seems dubious to be prescriptive about this is what you should do, this is what marriage means, this is what a committed relationship is all about. Because, you know, it's funny, you hear about when divorce was kind of legalized in various parts of the world, or was made easier to achieve, or started to destigmatize in various ways, suddenly the divorce rate spiked, and people can say to that, oh, there's an epidemic of divorces now, but people would have gotten divorced earlier if they could, but they couldn't, and now they can. This isn't an indication that something is wrong with marriage now, it's something was always wrong with marriage, or sort of the institution of how, we conduct ourselves with this. And, when you give people the option to leave it, a lot of them will take that option in a way that isn't possible when you don't present that option. So, and yeah, a lot of people are in unhappy marriages. Steve, his name was Pip's husband?
Yes, Steven.
Yeah, Steven. Yeah, again, we don't ever see him. We don't get a lot about him. We are given the understanding that he's done nothing wrong and that it's really
she says he's a good, loving husband.
Yeah.
He's bored.
Yeah, she also says things haven't been good for a while, and I do believe that there's tension in this marriage, as, any long-term committed relationship will have tensions of all kinds. And your mileage will vary on an individual, personal basis. Is the love that I do have for this person, even if it has waned, and the stability of the life we've built together, and the, giving a happy, in quotation marks, stable life for our children, is that enough to, be miserable about? And nobody can answer this for anyone else, I think, and nobody can answer it for themselves until they find themselves in that situation. And this is a situation that plays out over and over again on a very long time scale, that maybe eventually there is a breaking point. Like, there's a bit of, I think, a tendency to think of this as a sunk cost fallacy thing. Well, we didn't get divorced 3 years ago, so let's not get divorced now. Or we didn't get divorced 20 years ago, so now it's too late. Or, our kids are already adults. And, I don't think the thing that last thought, and then I'll volley it to you, because again, it's just such scattered thoughts with a question.
It's a loaded question. I purposely made it as loaded as possible.
Yeah, it's quite loaded. So well done loading. But I guess the last thing I want to say about it is, when Bob asks, so if you had the money and you were squirreling it away in case you had to leave, why didn't you leave? Fran says, because of the children.
Yes.
And this is before we are even introduced to the fact that she had this other potential lover.
Right.
And when she said that, in the audience, I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it. That was the only reason. But the way she said it so matter-of-factly made me think that certainly our playwright and maybe even the character believe that's the case. But where I thought this "Do you love me" sequence was going was that, yes, Fran saw the situation that my mother was in, where she didn't have any money of her own and couldn't get away. So I didn't ever want to be forced to stay with you, which is why I had money. But having given myself that option, why did I stay with you? Because that was my choice, because I wanted to. The fact that I have the freedom not to reinforces the fact that I stayed, not contradicts or casts doubt on why I stayed. But then she gives the answer, well, I stayed for the children, and then I had this other lover, and I could have left, which makes an interesting parallel with Pip's situation, but kind of, to me, deflated what could have been a very poignant moment of her saying, just because I wanted to have that option gives all the more reason why it's meaningful that I didn't take that option. And she was going to use the money so they could go on a trip together. She loves him. I don't know. I think the play kind of undercuts some of its own poignancy in this admittedly still very poignant interlude in the middle. Sorry, those are scattered thoughts. Take it away. Pontificate about the nature of love, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. I will pontificate as concisely as possible so we can wrap this up, because we're now over 2 hours. This play gave a lot to talk about. Bravo. Okay. So the minute I saw this scene, I knew that if you and I ended up having a discussion about this, we had to talk about this, because it's such a big scene. It's basically 2 big back-to-back scenes of Ben doing this, and then the fallout from that is them really coming to terms with what is this marriage. And I think what the play is trying to say is Fran's option is the preferred choice, because Pip blows up her marriage, and we know it gets blown up because yes, she comes back to Australia, it's implied after the mom's death. And does Stephen end up finding out all the details about what happens there? I assume he probably does. But
does Stephen take her back? We don't find out.
Or
do they
sequel
just
play?
Yeah, like they could just
Bob is hiking through South Africa. Pip is rebuilding her marriage. Rosie and Mia are roommates together in Sydney.
Nice. Love that for them.
Yeah. Ben is off in jail.
Ben is in jail. He gambled away all the money that his mother gave him, and now he's in jail.
Yes. So anyway, so because we have the scene in the first act with Pip in the letter where you find out Tris wasn't all it was built up to be. That pursuing this pleasure, while fun at the time, Pip goes, I don't think it was worth it. She goes, I don't feel as complete as I thought I was. And that she I don't know if she longs for her old life, but she goes, I missed the option of going back to my old life now. And the fact that, as you said, Fran's one moment of having an affair is with someone who is terminal kind of implies that Fran always had this in her that she was never really going to leave Bob. Because there's a moment where she says, Bob, what's his face? Don't you dare hit me. And Bob goes, I would never hit you. Yeah. And that right there says it all about their marriage, is that Bob may lose his temper with his kids and with her, but he's never been violent. He has always been a good, steady man. Sometimes boring and bland and kind of just a humdrum guy, blue-collar worker guy, but he has always been just there as a steady force. So that always told me that you're right. Fran liked the option of being able to get out, but then after that 7-year itch, that 10-year itch passed, and she said, I will stay for the children. And then she also has Rosie, too. Rosie is the reason that they end up really being together, is because she gets pregnant. Yeah. And it implies that either she popped the condom or she understood that Bob wasn't going to have a condom on, and ergo they conceived the child. I
thought they might have even implied that Bob initiated that as a strategy to keep her with
there
him.
Is also that impliedness too, because then Bob goes, is the child mine? Because there's the whole thing about the Tris, and we almost had a Mamma Mia situation here. Who is the father?
Well, it was never consummated, so they deflect
exactly. It was
never
consummated, which then resolves that issue. Anyway, but the whole point is, should you settle or should you go for one's desires? As someone who's watched my parents' marriage of 31 years of them running 2 companies, I can tell you there are numerous rough patches. And what my dad has always said to me is, Mac, when you get married, you should have it in your brain that failure is not an option. And that's my dad's point of view. He goes, to me, failure is not an option. I will do whatever I must to maintain and keep this healthy marriage going. And that's why I think if I were to rewrite this page, I would have taken the term settling out. Because I don't think it is settling. I think it's the choice of, do you work at your marriage and continue to work at it? Or do you settle for letting it go, letting it fester, and then you chasing your own?
It's not settling, it's
desires.
doubling down on the commitment.
It's doubling down on the commitment, right. It's looking at it going, we're in a rough patch. Do we choose to plow ahead with this and really make an effort to fix this problem? Or do we let this problem fester long enough that ultimately we're both unhappy and are happy to cut the line, basically, cut the bait and let it go? So for me, I go, as someone who has watched a marriage of over 30 years, I go, everything that I've seen in my life has said, no, you don't chase a tryst. You double down and you work at a marriage and go, if there's a problem, you talk, you communicate. You don't just chase something else because it's light and the grass is preferably greener on the other side, or in Canada, in Pip's case. So for me, I just go, marriage is about doubling down and fighting for something. If you want something, you will fight for it. And if you don't, then, like in Pip's case, clearly she did not see that it was worth fighting for. Even though, as she said, Stephen was nothing but kind and good to her, she just personally did not feel the fight was there. That was worth her going to marriage counseling, doing this and doing that to try and make it work. That it ultimately just came down to, she goes, I'm not happy, I want out. Now, as it implies, maybe Pip is always a bit of chases her own endeavors because there's the whole story about her not watching Rosie and Rosie cracking her head open.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, so maybe it's implied that maybe Pip is a bit more of her not self-absorbed, maybe more self-focused versus Fran, who, as it's shown from the get-go of this play, is all about family. And the fact that she puts her own happiness with giving Ben the money shows that when push comes to shove, Fran will always choose family, which always told me that Fran will absolutely one day accept Mia. It's just in that moment.
Yeah.
It was
a knee-jerk
reaction to it would have been lovely to see it.
6-hour version.
6-hour version. There will be some sort of scene of resolution on that front. But yeah, I mean, for me, the simple answer is yes. Marriage is something you don't settle for, but something you fight for.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran and Bob made the choice that when they got pregnant with Rosie, that they were going to fight through whatever obstacle they had to get to the next finish line.
Yeah, I would say, like, just to be clear, you are speaking just with your own personal moral position of how you would like to go about your own marriage one day. And I think that's a good ideal that many people should strive for. I'll defer back to the thing I said about we can't be prescriptive and
no, exactly. There are some marriages where you know it has to, because it's not healthy to keep fighting for something that is clearly harming both of you.
And I think
I've seen marriages like that are, they both still love each other very much, but it is obvious to everyone that prolonging this pain of not being fulfilled with each other is not helping anybody in this situation. And sometimes you get better by letting go.
Yeah. And something I'll add just to kind of cap it off back to the play itself, because we can go in many different real life personal directions. This is a very
philosophical question.
But the play kind of presents something interesting by stating very explicitly that Fran and Bob known each other since they were kids. They were young sweethearts. They've only known each other, so which kind of creates this sort of questions about, did we wait long enough to get married? Did we, explore other options, sow oats, in a proverbial sense of, or did they kind of commit to each other way too early? And did they, should they be stuck with the consequences of that very early decision?
Right.
I think, I just speaking personally for myself, I feel like, we thankfully, at least us now, live in a time where there's really no rush to get married, and partners can live together before, like, road test this relationship before you get the lawyers involved and draw up contracts. And I think that's, it's something that is really unique to the circumstances that this relationship is written into, and we don't necessarily know how long Stephen and Pip knew each other to create the parallelism of that, if it was a similar idea.
At least 10 years, because they have 2 kids.
Yeah, so they've been together for a long time. We know that Pip's first kiss was with her cousin in the shed, which is an interesting detail, so it's not that this is the one person she's ever been romantic with, but clearly she saw no future with the cousin. I wonder why. Anyway, I think, the play does a good job of presenting a very credible version of this, specifically the Bob and Fran relationship, where we can understand why they would have this fealty to each other to ride out the relationship for as long as they have, which is what I then go back to. I wish that could have been a conclusion they came to in that fight in the backyard, as opposed to leaving the audience to wonder probably longer than was necessary.
Yeah.
Anywho.
Yeah, I mean, once again, there's going to be no clear answer to this. It's going to be audiences, your interpretation of marriage is something, it could be something entirely different because you've lived a different life experience than either Ryan or I. And
or Bob or Fran or Pip or Stephen.
Exactly. So,
but the play will make you think.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. This play, once again, this is why I tell people all about this play. I'm like, if it ever comes back or you have a chance to see a reading of this or another regional performance, and I mean, when Nicole Kidman, the day you do this, I will absolutely, Ron and I will do a whole mini-series.
We will sign up for Australian Netflix or get a VPN or whatever we need to do.
We will do whatever we have to, a whole mini-series review.
It seems appropriate.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. All right.
There we go.
Mac, I guess I'm hosting this episode is how we started it, but then, we devolved into not Mac, thank you so much for joining me for this discussion of things I know to be true, which has ended its run at Mirvish, but check it out in any other capacity you can. The script is published, so maybe give it a read. You do you. Mac, where can people find and follow you if they want to hear more of your lovely voice?
Well, I have my other podcast, Before the Downbeat, a musical podcast, where Ryan is joining me for a whole new miniseries that will be coming out in the next few weeks, which I'll announce here. So if any of our Before the Downbeat listeners are also tuning in here, Ryan and I will be doing a episode by episode rundown of the TV musical show Gallivant. So, stay tuned for that goodness, because there's going to be 8 whole episodes of fun there between Ryan and I. So check that on out, as well as Ryan and I did a whole commentary of Fiddler on the Roof. So if you haven't gotten enough of Ryan and I harping on Atevka and Tevya. And
all roads lead back to Fiddler, as this discussion has indicated. We can never escape.
Exactly. So that is it for me. Follow me up at Mackenzie Corner or at my other channel, Before the Downbeat, a musical podcast.
Great. So
Ryan, give us that classic Ron Borochovitz send-off.
As you know, I'm not easy to find on social media, so don't bother trying. If you like what I say and do, just follow Cup of Hemlock at COH Theater on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Follow us on YouTube, subscribe, like, share, get in the comments if you want to comment on anything we've said. If you're listening to this as a podcast, do the podcast things. Keep these theater enthusiast discussions alive.
I'm sure there'll be lots of comments about this.
I hope so. This is a fun discussion.
We have given much thought.
If people can get through a 2.5 hour or so discussion about this play that hopefully they saw before it disappeared. Yes. All right. Well, Mac, thank you so much for joining me. This has been such a fun discussion. And everyone, thank you for listening. Cheers.
We'll
see you next time.
Episode.